Friends, fans, and fine folk, grab your drinks and snacks and come on down round the campfire for this short rest. Me and my friends, Roltercast! Hello everybody, down there as well, all around me. How are you going? Let's hope that people can hear you. Testing for sound.
Hello.
Testing for sound, definitely. Sound. You know the sound that I was doing, all that sound check that I was doing before, and now it's just.
You were just pushing random buttons, weren't you?
I was just
doing
hitting random things. There we go.
You weren't even pushing. You were just doing this to the side of your camera.
Not just on camera. It's like I'm just doing a sound check now.
Yeah. Rob, we can see that you're not pressing.
Oh shit! Cameras
at all.
I'm still doing the sound check now.
Bless, very profesh over here.
Totes profesh, nothing but profeshest of profeshers. Welcome in. It's wonderful to have you here. I've been a fan of the podcast Roltercast for a while now. Since I knew that I was going to be meeting Ellen at PAX last year, and so I binged the first season of it so that I had something to talk to her about. I was like, I better actually know what she does before meeting her. And so I started watching, listening to Roltercast. No, I don't think I brought it up once. But I was like, I better at least know what she does. So I listened to the first one, I got hooked and was like, oh, that first season was great. And I listened to all of the second one, and then I ran out of time. And then there was no priority to listen to it anymore.
It was.
Okay, went off it immediately. Then I had no priority to actually listen to it again until I was like, I better get them on for a short rest. And I realised I've only listened to 2 of their 9 seasons, so I better listen to another one. And in the last few days, I've binged all of season 3. So I'm now 3 seasons into 9, which is more respectable, but I've still got a long way to go.
That's all right. We'll catch up soon in the future, and then you'll have to do this.
Exactly. Every time that we're about to meet up in person, PAX Australia or something, I'll be like, all right, better get another season done.
One more. They're very bingeable.
So they are very bingeable. That's one of the best things about it. I might be a bit loud. I'm going to turn myself down a bit. Yeah. All right.
I've always said that about you.
A very loud personality. So I like to start off. I call this series a short rest because in D&D you have a sit-down breather. It takes about an hour. This is going to be about an hour or 2. And so this is us on a mission, having a short rest. What do you reckon we are doing? What mission are we on? And usually it's an understanding that we're in D&D because that's the majority of the TTRPGs I talk about. But you guys have done everything but D&D.
We
which
system do D&D?
Yeah, which system are we in, and what short rest are we doing?
Oh, we could be anywhere, right?
Yeah,
pretty much. We could be in space. We could be in the world of Avatar.
I need a dice.
You know
I need a 20-sided dice that has a different setting on each one, like sci-fi,
that's right.
steampunk.
You know where we haven't been as a company much? We haven't been underwater much.
Oh, okay. So we're on an underwater
and
mission.
like, as Australians, I feel like, the beach is like 20 minutes away. We should go underwater more.
No, we're all hydrophobic.
So we're on an underwater mission,
right?
Yeah.
We're halfway to Atlantis.
Studying already.
Yes.
We're halfway through. So our mission is to get to Atlantis, and we're underwater.
Yeah.
Are we in a sub, or are we just like sea-dwelling creatures? Are we sea-breathing?
I think we should avoid subs.
Yeah.
Why?
What's happened in the news recently?
Don't avoid subs, everybody. Subs is how I pay my mortgage. Subscribe. Lots of more subs, bits, and donations. He exploded his subs so that you don't have to. Give me your subs. So, maybe I should leave.
Well, it's a bit hard.
Subs are dangerous. Give me them. Yeah, true.
If we're not inside some kind of vehicle, otherwise we're just
kind
going.
of bubble. Maybe we've got telepathy or something. All right, we're in a vehicle.
Yeah,
we're in a definitely not submarine. That is designed for going submarine.
We're in a Dom Marine.
Holden Tirana conversion.
A Holden Tirana. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This has gotten very Australian.
You mean Holden Piranha?
Hey!
Thank you.
A green
That's
Tirana
it, everybody.
was,
Thanks for joining me.
Was my first car. A green
Was it?
Tirana. Yeah.
Oh.
I didn't
What'd you
know
do
that.
to
Hammered
it?
down. The gearbox dropped out. So,
That old chestnut.
yeah.
Rough.
Usual when you've got an old beat 'em up car.
Yeah.
So we've almost started, everybody. So we're on a mission. We're underwater. We're in a Holden Tirana that's been converted into a submarine, James Bond style. What are we eating and drinking on this short rest, both IRL and in this fantasy Tirana situation?
Chico roll, right? It's gotta be. We gotta keep the Aussie thing going.
Yeah.
Meat pie.
Meat pie.
You just want this to be as super clear to the listener as possible that I'm interviewing us.
I'm naturalized, but I'm leaning in.
I've had a craving for that I haven't had in about 10 years, but I saw in a store recently, wagon wheels. I've had a massive craving for wagon wheels, and I haven't had them in. Aren't they just? They're not just Australian, are they?
No. We had wagon wheels growing up in the UK.
Yeah, there you go. That's how we reach out to the international listeners here. Wagon wheels is how we bring us together.
Wagon wheels are universal.
So we're all snacking on this.
We can finally unite. At least the Australia and the UK.
Yeah. So we're snacking on wagon wheels while we delve down trying to find Atlantis. Perfect. So that's our setup for today, in which it is not referenced once more during the whole session.
Right.
Excellent.
So we'll suck at improv.
So anybody who I did that once at PAX last year, where we were on an improv panel which was called like Design a Whole World in an Hour, and we set up something really important at the very beginning and didn't mention it again the entire rest of the hour.
Oh, isn't that just DMing in a nutshell?
It is. Yeah, it's very much. So, for anyone who is here because of me and doesn't know who the hell you guys are, you are I'll let you guys do the elevator pitch. What your podcast? What do you normally tell people?
So we are Roll to Cast. We are a TTRPG variety show podcast. You can find us on all good podcatchers, and basically we endeavor to invite the world to see different systems, different stories, different games. We play a different game every season. We pay an artist to provide the soundtrack for that season. Different Roll to Caster is the GM or DM or storyteller each season, and we look at trying out different systems, different stories, different themes, different platform, and just kind of show that there's like a million different ways to play TTRPGs that isn't just D&D, although we have delved into fantasy as well. And we do that as a short, curated, between half an hour and hour episodes, depending on the season and what we're trying to do at the time. And we've got 9 seasons worth. We played everything from Cyberpunk to The Witcher to Kids on Bikes to Starfinder, Vampire the Masquerade, and this season we are currently involved in Kieran Gillen's Die, the TTRPG, which is about as meta as we've gone for a season so far. And that aside, we also do a monthly live stream as voted on by our patrons, where we get to do a video content and a game that they have voted on that we otherwise might not get to play because it's just simply a one-shot. And that's kind of the pitch for Roll2Cast, really. And we're Australian, if you couldn't tell.
It's almost like you've done it a few times. That is a very curated pitch. I love it.
We've just celebrated our, is it 4 years?
4 years.
Fourth anniversary.
And over 200 episodes.
Which I believe is the Fruit and Flowers anniversary. So if people want to send us gifts for our anniversary,
that's fruit.
Send us fruit through the post. Great idea.
It is fruit and flowers.
Send perishables through the.
Send perishables to Australia. Great idea.
Well, you can drive fruit.
Next anniversary is raw meat. Phil. Could you send us raw meat? That's great.
Please breach biosecurity. Thank you.
Oh yeah, Australia is famously very lax on quarantines.
New Zealand has similarly strict biosecurity borders, and yet my brother once sent me a package that he thought was a bit of fun because I live in a big city, Auckland, and he's like, you probably don't see much in the way of plants and stuff. I found these cool things. They're like for like guerrilla warfare, getting plants back into cities sort of thing. They're like little clay pots.
Seed bombs.
Little clay pots filled with soil and seeds and wild seeds, wildflowers and stuff, and you just throw them into abandoned car parks and lots and things, and then they smash and kind of plant themselves and grow.
Gosh.
And they look like grenades. So he sent me a thing through the post and he sent me 3 grenades filled with soil and seeds, and somehow they arrived at my door.
Wow,
impressive. And I had to be the one to
hate you?
I had to be the one to then message biosecurity myself and say, I don't think these should have come through. They said, oh no, you're right. I think we missed that. Could you please drop them off for us? And I was like, no. If you want them,
come get them.
Yeah. And they ended up, they sent a guy in who picked them up and like emptied them out, and then gave me the clay grenade things back just as like an ornament.
You should have lobbed them at him from the top window.
I must say, back to D&D a little bit. That would be an excellent druid weapon.
Yeah,
just like a grenade full of seeds, like
and it like casts entangle or something.
Artemis and druid combo.
Someone write that down.
So, I'm too lazy to write. So I like to start short rests with talking about names. Like, where did the name Roll to Cast come from, and who came up with it?
You know what? We came up with I remember we had a short list of names that included like D&D and D.
That was my pitch, I think. D&D.
Roll to Cast. I can't remember some of the others, but we talked about this for
weeks.
Ages,
man.
Because it's like this. Because basically, for those who don't know, we were initially a Futurama podcast. We'd done that for 3 years previous,
right.
And then we had we were about halfway through, about 3/4 of the way through, and we'd always wanted to do a second podcast at some point. And I actually believe it was Phil that really spearheaded wanting to do a cyberpunk podcast specifically. And then the more we kind of talked about it, we formulated what became Roll to Cast, and it was a big talking point is what is the name, what's the title, and like what does it evoke. It has to be something that all 4 of us are happy with, and it has to evoke exactly what we're trying to put out. So I can't remember why we settled. It's probably like it was clear, it was simple, it's easily like something that you can advertise and remember. And it kind of like
good SEO, yeah.
Has it been and role players?
Has there been any regret with having a homophone in the title though? Because you have to spell it every time.
That's ROLE.
Yeah, ROLE,
ROLE. For SEO, it's not great. Because I mean, typecasting and role casting gets in the way of that. So spread the word, ROLE to cast.
But
so much. Other than that, it's a lot of fun. I think we're all really happy with it. It's a cool thing.
Because we were trying to figure out as well what our shtick would be, or like what made us unique as a kind of group and the product that we'd be putting forward. And so, obviously we wanted to. It was a combination of we're going to do TTRPGs. We're not going to settle on one, so we don't want to be anything affiliated with D&D. That'll
like
kind of lock us into that'll like lock us into one kind of format. And the fact that we're all trained creatives, so it's we're preparing for a role. It was kind of kismet of it really all brung it together.
Brung it together, mate.
Yeah.
Good word.
Yeah. I also feel like it was one of the early ideas that we were like, I'm not sure. We'll sit on it. And we just kept coming back to it.
It's amazing.
And eventually we were like, it's that one.
Like this, but not this. And then you go, okay, let's just do that.
Yeah, exactly.
That one,
It's amazing how much time creative folk tend to deliberate over names and like really scrutinize and come back to it and name. And eventually, in very short amount of time, a name just becomes what it is. Like you could have called yourself anything at all, and people would be like, yeah, that's just the name. That's just what that is. They associate it with
the Kids Who Game.
The Kids Who Game. Have you listened to that Kids Who Game podcast? Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
So Roll to Cast came about from the 4 of you originally. Was it just the 4 of you? Was it any of you joined later? Did you? Have anybody else that you've killed off?
Well, actually, yes.
Not for Roll to Cast. Roll to Cast has been the 4 of us through the whole process. The original podcast has the first podcast we did had I think like 4 different iterations of cast. We had a bit of a rotating cast briefly there. It was originally started by Sean and myself, and then we invited Phil in.
Yeah, Phil became the new Chris because Chris went away for a while. You went to
Sydney.
And then we lost James, and then Ellen became the new James, and we also had a 4th member at that time called Josh, and then eventually James left, so Josh left. It was Ellen, myself, and Phil for a while. Chris came back to Adelaide, and then that was kind of our core 4, and once that started getting rolling again, that's when we
started to run out of Futurama episodes.
Honestly,
what are we doing next?
Yeah, we're good at this podcasting thing. We've seen it with the Futurama podcast, which is still out there. Shut Up and Take My Podcast is still out there. But we
And it had a relatively nice audience as well. Shut up.
Yeah, really positive
bad,
audience. We networked with a great number of people, fans, as well as like writers and directors from Futurama. So we've interviewed some of the creators behind
So you heard
that.
I must say
it's what's helped us interview people in the TTRPG space, like Mike Pondsmith for Cyberpunk. But yeah, after Shut Up and Take My Podcast, Roll to Cast became the go.
Yeah, and we found. Sorry, you go, Alan. No, you go, Alan.
I was just going to say it was a bit of a high point in terms of, we'd been doing that podcasting for a while and speaking to some of the creators behind Futurama, and specifically like one of the writers from the Simpsons in Australia episode.
Oh, right.
For 90s kids in Australia, I think it was just like, wow, who would have thunk that we would have here today?
It was such a weird thing where what we learnt doing Shut Up and Take My Podcast and what we kind of had really reiterated for us with Rob the Cast is with a lot of these creatives that you say, hey, can we interview you for the show? We've not really had a no because it's in good faith, and B, you've got these people that really do want to talk about their craft and want to talk about like what they bring to the table, what they've done and what's going forward. Like everyone's really been lovely to us and really accommodating, and which is like great because these are interviews, we don't necessarily get to pay them. They're donating their time to us, which is amazing in itself, especially because a lot of these people are still working professionals. But it's been so awesome just to be like, oh, if you ask, generally they will say yes. And that's been like fun to know.
If you build it, they will come.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And what's interesting about this crew that's all together is that actually, before we all came back together to do this, we're actually all alums from the same acting school.
Right, yeah.
So
I was gonna say, like, how did you...
years? We were there at the same time, Chris.
Well, alone is stretching it.
I guess maybe. Yeah.
I didn't graduate.
Chris moved on to bigger and better things.
Yeah, I became a director, not an actor.
Yeah. Not an actor.
Chris and I were in the same year level. Phil was the year above us, and Eleanor was the year below us.
Yeah. So we all knew each other, and then went off to sort of do our separate things, and then eventually ended up back in this little team, which I think is kind of sweet.
And what initially brought you guys in together as a team? Like, how did you know each other if it wasn't through the school? Like, you kind of knew each other through the school, but that's not how you decided to start working together on the podcast.
Well, Chris and I initially, this was like close to about 6 months after I graduated from AC Arts. I already felt that I wasn't really getting a lot of work. And I was like, well, wouldn't it be so much better to like do my own stuff and like work with people that we want to work with? And Chris and I got to talking, and we talked about this idea of like creating a podcast. No idea what it was going to be about. Because initially we did a Simpsons podcast and we recorded like 9 episodes of it before realizing, oh, there's a million of these. And they're like, well, fine, Futurama then.
We were literally like 3 white guys from Australia talking about the Simpsons, and it's like, cool. There's nothing here. There's a million of those, and a million doing it far better than what we could. So we swapped into Futurama. We tried to do a variety comedy podcast as well. But then the podcast continued on. We eventually got the Futurama one going. And then I stepped away. Phil stepped in. And that was because, Sean, you reached out to Phil from memory.
Yeah, we bumped into each other, I think.
Yeah, I remember this because it felt like such like one of those like phony conversations where we're like, oh yeah, we should do something together sometime. Yeah, of course. And then nothing happens. But like, obviously, when the opportunity arose, we did. And I think, like, to your point, Rob, like, it was very much a thing of whenever we wanted to bring new people in, or, when there was like slots available, it's like, well, we want to have like-minded people we know we bounce off of. So of course you're going to go to people that you studied with and know quite well, and know that can like kind of work on the same wavelength of you. And we're all fucking nerds. So like that was a prerequisite too.
Yeah.
We live in Adelaide, which is a large country town. So
right.
You
I also feel like
bump into people.
I didn't get a chance to work with... Well, Chris and I worked together once I was out of acting school. Chris directed a show I was in.
That's right, yes.
And I didn't get a chance to work with Phil at all because Phil was in 3rd year when I was in 1st year. But Sean, were you and I in a few things together?
Yeah, we did Earthquakes in London.
We did Earthquakes in London, which was like a 3-hour play with songs multiple scenes happening.
That's the only thing we did together.
The whole cast was like miserable because it was so draining and taxing.
Yeah.
So
It's appropriate for
we
London.
were in the trenches together.
No, we hung out a lot, like outside of school and during, but like other than that, we never really worked together before. And it was just kind of it's just nice to kind of work with people that you haven't worked with for years and get to like do a thing that you all share a passion for and really enjoy. And like something as simple as like, let's just watch a TV show and then talk about it. Or let's play a game and do a whole season and like bring our expertise and knowing what we can kind of bring together to make it different. Like, we can put in music. We can have a whole structured story. We can like look at it dramaturgically and go a beginning, middle, and end, but not through having a script, just through knowing innately that we can trust each other enough to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you started, you moved from Futurama, you were going into TTRPG. You said that Phil wanted to do a cyberpunk RPG, and did you know at that point it was only going to be for one season, or did you anticipate with season 1 that it was going to be cyberpunk?
So we take the podcasting space as like quite a professional kind of approach. So what I did was I came up with a proposal, like wrote a proposal for everybody. And I said, this is what I think we should do next. I have a good idea for a first season. Cyberpunk is looking to kind of take off in popularity. And look, hey, it comes from this 80s RPG that no one's looked at in a million years. Why don't we do this? And then it was more of it became a sort of a group discussion about, okay, that's a good idea. What would we do afterwards? Would we keep going with it?
Right.
Would we do something else? Would we ever do D&D? And that became a discussion between us. So we have a very horizontal structure in that way that our decision making is really collective. So I really just came up with that initial kind of like spark of like, hey, why don't we do this? And then the others contributed to what it would become.
So you knew right from season 1 that it was going to be a variety thing, every season new TTRPG?
That was fairly early.
We knew the first because we knew pretty early that if we were going to go ahead with it, Chris would. Because, like, remembering at this point, both Ellen and myself had never GM'd in our life. In fact, both of us were definitely the novices of the group. Phil,
my debut is in Roll to Cast. It's recorded in Roll to Cast, which is scary to think about. Chris
is a World of Darkness fanatic, and I'll say it, expert for going on, 2 decades worth? Like, all up?
TTRPGs I've been playing since I was 8. So that's over 20 years. But World of Darkness, I would say about 15 years. About that, 15 years.
So that was kind of a natural progression, knowing, like if season 1 goes really well, and there's like because we knew if we want to go forward with it, it will depend on if anyone's listening, if anyone really enjoys it. And it got like really good feedback, and Artelzurian Games kind of threw themselves behind it in ways that we didn't expect. So the natural progression was like, oh, cool. Well, it makes sense for Chris to do the next one so that Phil can be a player. And then I think just naturally we just went, oh, cool. Wouldn't it be kind of awesome if a different person took a season every time? Which, was daunting. I don't want to speak for you, Ellen, but like definitely for the two of us going like, we've never done this before. But like that was its own set of challenges, and then going, well, cool. If we were to do that, what kind of game would we bring to the table? Because like, Phil very much lives in that world of cyberpunk, and you gravitated towards it so effortlessly. And Chris, we knew, was pretty synonymous with World of Darkness. What does that mean for Sean and for Ellen? Like, what kind of game would we run?
So we had season 1 and season 3 were Cyberpunk 2020 and Cyberpunk Red, and that was Phil was GM. And then we had season 2 was Vampire the Masquerade, which was Chris. And then because I've only listened to the first 3, I'm not sure. I know Ellen's doing Die, right? But what are you?
I'm doing Die right now.
We had a mod of Call of Cthulhu. Yeah, a mod of Call of Cthulhu. That was Sean. So that was your debut. Cthulhu. That was your debut, and then Kids on Bikes was Ellen's debut as a runner. Did we loop back to me for Witcher?
Yeah, we went to Witcher.
Yeah.
Avatar Legends was Chris. Chris showing his softer side, going from vampire to a kids TV show.
Yeah. He had multitudes.
Yeah. He has a great understanding of the world about Avatar and the tone, which is amazing to go from such a dark tone of World of Darkness to something so bright and emotionally charged in a different way. Teenage emotions was really cool. And then Sean continued to just pick the crunchiest things he could by doing Starfinder.
Why?
Oh,
Why do I do that?
Starfinder
I don't
season
know.
8.
But
Only you can
we don't
answer that,
know.
Sean.
Yeah, we have no idea.
Season
And then-
Rob,
yeah,
can
and
you
then-
maybe ask Sean that question?
Yeah,
and
let's
maybe we
at
can
some
get
point
to the heart
today.
of it.
As a novice GM, why do you keep picking?
You punish yourself.
Yeah.
I
And that
mean,
brings us to
D&D,
guys that I missed
D&D was my
Yeah.
first ever TTRPG, and it's not exactly not got the crunch in it. So
Which edition of D&D? Fifth edition?
for me, it was 5th. Yeah, so not as
there
bad
you
at
go.
jumping in early, but
Second
yeah,
It's
I
an
have-
interesting.
I have done D&D 5e, and then I read cover to cover the Pathfinder 1e rulebook in order to run a 3-shot of Pathfinder one time. And my
very good.
my friend Dead Aussie Gamer, aka Ask a Pathfinder, was like,
Yeah.
you know, you're not meant to learn. You're not meant to learn any system, especially Pathfinder, by just reading it like it's a novel. And I was like, hey man, it's what I do.
God
That's my
damn.
approach.
Yeah.
but I like it.
But Cyberpunk Red was an interesting one because
Yes.
so I did seasons 1 and 3, which is a bit of a quick turnaround for me, sharing around. But the reason for that is because as Sean said, Arthur Soaring Games, who published Cyberpunk 2020 and Red and Witcher, they really got behind us, and they actually said, "Hey, look, we're coming out with the new Cyberpunk set in 2045, dovetailing it with Cyberpunk 2077 in some ways. Do you want to do a season of this? We'll give you the rules early," which was
Nice.
amazing. So
Yeah.
I had to shout out Jay Gray, who's the community manager over at RTG, and he sent us the non laid out rules.
Yeah.
Right, didn't have the law setting,
Yeah.
just had all the updated rules, and he's
That's
like,
awesome.
"Here you go." And then he
Wasn't
made himself
finished
available
formatting.
for questions.
Yeah.
So I was
That's
like,
amazing.
so what's happening here in 2045? What's happened to the center of the city? What are these guys up to? And I used that to make a story such that when Cyberpunk Red dropped, we had a podcast.
Right. Yeah.
It was ready to go right there.
So was
I
that,
cannot.
so was it
Amazing, guys.
Was it scheduled so that the Cyberpunk Red episodes would start to go when Cyberpunk Red was being released, or just
That was the
before?
idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we were already a few episodes in when Red officially dropped to the general public. I believe
Yes.
that's how it,
Yeah,
which is kind of
trying
similar to what we did
On-ramp
with The
people
Witcher.
so they're getting excited for it.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
'cause we did that with The Witcher as well, where we knew that season 2 was coming out roughly around the
Of
time
show,
that
yeah.
Of the
of
TV
the
show.
show would come out roughly around the time that we would have a season
Yeah,
6 slot
smart.
beginning, because we knew how many episodes were in 5.
Yeah.
So we did that. We jumped on that bandwagon, so to speak, and by the time that Witcher had started, it was about a month from when the TV show would launch its second season, so we could really jump on that train and get people talking about it.
So there's a lot
There's
of
been a few times where we've had to pivot as a company. Red being the biggest example, because we were we'd already recorded what then became season 4.
Oh,
We're halfway through.
Yeah.
Nearly all of it was recorded.
So Red was
Yeah.
recorded after season 4.
Yeah, so Pop Cthulhu we had recorded because that was our first guest appearance, and so we recorded half of it. And our good friend Paul Goodman, who is the musician for the first 5 seasons, sorry,
5 seasons.
and then came back for 8. Anyway, he was our guest 4th player, and he had to fly over from Melbourne to do that. And we go, "Oh, cool! You'll just need to come back once more in a couple of weeks' time, and we'll finish it off." He's like, "Yeah, cool." He leaves. COVID hits, and then we don't get to record the remainder of it for 14 months. But in that period, we'd got the Red opportunity because we didn't know what we were going to do at that point. But then we went, cool, let's just give ourselves more room. We'll do Red because that only needs the core of us. And then we dropped that. So there's sequentially, it's a bit different to how we actually recorded it. But it was a happy accident.
There's a story to do with the filming of Lord of the Rings, which is similar to we'll finish this tomorrow kind of thing, and then they had a huge break. There's a scene, I can't remember which one it is now, but I talked about it back at drama school when I did a presentation, where they recorded a Frodo and Sam dialogue in a cave or something, and they were recording inside in this cave or this cave set, because the weather was terrible in Queensland. It was like flooding at the time. And so they were recording inside, and they recorded all of Frodo's things, all of Frodo's scenes, his dialogue and everything. And then they ran out of time, and they were going to film Sean Astin's stuff the next day. And then the weather cleared up, and they were like, "Well, we've got good weather. Let's go film this other stuff." They started filming this other stuff. It was about
Never got
14.
back to it.
It was about 14 months before they then went back to the cave to film Sean Astin's side of that conversation. And I did a presentation on it at drama school because I was like, what sort of techniques do you need as a film actor or as instead of like a stage actor to know how to put yourself back in the shoes of a conversation you were having 14 months ago and stuff. So yeah, it's always funny when something like COVID happens and it's like, well, we've changed plans. We've suddenly come right down in the middle of something that we were doing, and we're going to have to separate those two things that shouldn't be separated. And bring them back.
I mean, we all live in the same city, so when spikes of COVID happen, they happen to kind of all of us.
Lock down all of you, yeah.
Various people have had COVID at various times, and Ellen and Sean actually live in the same house, so they've had to separate themselves. Chris used to live in there, so that has actually interrupted recording and stuff occasionally, where we're just like, oh, we can't get together.
So did you get your friend Paul from Melbourne back in after?
Eventually,
we did. And bless him, because he was totally game, came all the way, and that was the first time we'd had a guest star on Roll to Cast. So Goodman really was a first frontier for us. In that sense. But he came in and like with such energy and just made it work, and so grateful to him for that.
So there's a lot of sort of production questions coming up for me then. So let's talk a little bit about like the logistics of how is a season filmed, over how long, and how do you decide when you're going to put it out and where to make the splits and things like this, because you're filming them like in like a full game session and then cutting it into half-hour chunks.
Sean's in the studio, so he'll show you
right now. So this is our space. Nice. Weirdly enough, like humble beginnings, because we recorded the first 2 seasons in my bedroom. We just had this small, I used up half the room, the space in my room, just to have this like circular table. We had the mic set up there. So I remember there was even, just a quick tangent, we did an episode of Shut Up and Take My Podcast where Chris and Ellen were recording. I was asleep in my bed.
Right.
You guys keep recording. I am so tired. It's fine. Just turn off the mixer once we're done. But yes, so we would do.
It was like a 3-hour episode as well. Chris and I went to Emma, and Sean slept the whole time.
That's impressive that you can sleep through it.
Oh yeah, look, I'm deaf in one ear. So, and weirdly enough, I'm also the editor of this podcast. So go figure. But so. We will generally. It has kind of changed season to season, but especially for the first 2 seasons, it would be Friday, Saturday, Sunday in roughly 6 to 8 hour chunks with breaks. We'll record the entire season. So it usually ends up now, especially because our seasons have kind of ballooned and become a little bit longer. It'll be 3 to 5 full days of recording, sometimes in batches, sometimes over several weekends, but we roughly get between 15 and 20 hours worth of full unedited content. That's kind of how it works out. And then it becomes my job to go away and kind of roughly I edited those with a few exceptions. Obviously, Phil was the editor for season 1 and season 3, the Cyberpunk ones. Cyberpunk Red was done completely by Phil. I helped and I mastered a bit for season 1. But since we kind of divvied out our roles a little bit more clearly in seasons onto that, I've taken over duties for editing. So very much we use Adobe Audition. We try to aim to be half-an-hour chunks, just so that the idea is that you can listen to an episode in a commute. You don't have to dedicate 2-3 hours of time to sit down and go through everything. It's like you can do it in your own time.
It makes it much more bingeable, because I've seen over the last week or so when I've been listening to the 3rd season, I'll be doing something, walking the dog or something, and I'll get home and I'll go, I should really turn this off and do something, and I'll look at how much time's left and I'll go, it's only 5 minutes, I'll finish the episode. Whereas you wouldn't do that if it was a 2-hour thing. You'd look at the episode and go, there's an hour and a half, I'll just stop it here, and you just stop in the middle of whatever the scene is or whatever. It sort of encourages you to just listen to an entire episode all at once, and then you can pick up from a nice place to pick up again next time.
Well, Sean's extremely good at finding cliffhangers as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
which
like,
is incredible how he does it.
What editing experience did you have before this? You did editing with the Futurama one as well, or Sean seems to have lost audio, I think.
Sean can't hear anything, I think. So we're basically self-taught in sort of the editing stuff. The Futurama thing didn't need as much editing, really.
Right.
It needed a bit of mastering, but we really didn't edit out much at all.
More of a top and tail kind of a job.
Pretty
Stick
much,
some
yeah.
Intro and outro to it, and check out anything that's obviously, you know, all the anti-Semitic things that you say.
I think the internet's gone down to their house. That's right. Yeah.
To cut all that
We're gonna cut. And we did interviews. We did interviews as well. So we were like, you know, we had to be like, make sure, hey, you know, anything you don't want shared or anything. I mean, generally we didn't really cover anything like that. So, but we're basically kind of self-taught in that. When we started doing the Roll to Cast stuff, my initial idea, and this was supported by everyone, was this idea that it would be a bit more like a radio play, that it would have sound effects, that it would have music, and we would really tighten up the editing. So that involved, you know, we had some experience with the software, with Adobe, and stuff like that. But this was a kind of a new proposition where it's like, in combat, you want to cut out all the silences, maybe some of the rules lookups. We want to add... Well, at least we can still see me. That's important because I'm talking.
I'll be fixing this. Hey, this also after Twitch it goes to YouTube, and after YouTube it goes to podcast. So the people listening to a podcast don't know.
Podcast, they have no idea what's happening.
We'll just pretend. We'll just pretend there's nothing going wrong with the cameras at all.
Yeah, so it became a much more intensive proposition in terms of editing. So, like Sean said, I did most of 1 and then 3. So I have some experience with doing it, and now Sean's our kind of mainline editing. And so some episodes are easier to edit. You know, they're more roleplay heavy. There's some ambiance, maybe a bit of music here and there. You might throw in some artificial dice roll sound effects to mark out where those are. And then you have one that's all combat, right? And combat, you tighten everything up. So the points where you're adding up dice rolls and comparing things, or maybe clarifying things, those all get truncated.
Yeah,
we kind of edit it for sense, but you know, if there's a combat, you want to go quickly. It wants to feel like it feels at the table. So that's
I was going to say that is one of the things
learned.
that I do notice. It's very recognizable that there is work gone into thinking about that stuff. Like the other day, I was listening to one of the episodes where Ellen is asked something about her character sheet, and she just gives the answer, and I'm like, "How did she know?" Oh, edited. I was like, "Oh, that's right." She stopped to look it up, and then they edited it back in again. And I imagine after 9 seasons, you at a point where you guys as performers as well, you just know to be like, "Oh, stop talking over each other," or stop while somebody's looking something up, so that it's easier to cut out later.
Yes, yeah, we're fairly skilled when it comes to knowing how to perform to make sure the end product is strong. Like we're conscious of the fact that we aren't just people playing around the table. That was a deliberate effort from the start, that we were going to place value in production.
And performance.
Performance is significant for us. We have that shared skill set, so we might as well use it. If we're going to use it, we might as well use it to its fullest extent, and not kind of hamstring ourselves by acting in a way or not taking full advantage of all the different techniques that we could use. But
it makes sense.
On top of that was this focus of like, sometimes an audience is not going to be paying 100% full attention. And so you're wanting to deliver it for your audience. It's less about, it's the old thing of like, you want to present things as authentic. Sometimes that means you actually do quite the opposite, particularly in, say, film.
Yep.
Like with the example before, like, you want to present that conversation as it happened, but like it didn't. It was 14 months between, or however long.
Yeah, exactly.
And so putting effort into post-production to ensure it feels authentic, to ensure it feels good to listen to, just from an audio perspective.
One of the big things
was
that
a
people
high priority.
People don't realize is when they're like, oh, you know, me and my friends have fun playing D&D, and I'm sure other people would want to listen to it or want to tune in on a Twitch channel. I want to listen as a podcast. And it's like, no. There's a very big difference between playing a TTRPG with your friends and putting one on as a production, as some kind of a product that you're putting out there. It is ultimately a show that you're creating, and if you're producing it and you want it to, as you say, you want it to feel like it is an authentic game at the table, you're going to need to make it not authentic in order to make it feel that way. Even come down to like on film and stuff, like when you are, the distance between you and your scene partner might be like either way closer than you feel is comfortable, or way further away, just because it sells on camera better. So it's like you're doing something inauthentic to make it feel like it's more authentic.
Like this.
You have to bring something up to your face to look at it this close, because that's how close it needs to be in order for the camera. So you need to do things to make it feel more authentic than it actually is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think Dead Air feels different, right? Combat feels different when you're playing casually, right? It doesn't. You can maintain the investment in the combat scene even if there's a lull. But if you're listening, you can't. Right? You can't. The Dead Air is Dead Air.
I think it comes down to as well, like another benefit of you doing shorter episodes is that it comes with a recap of what happened last time, a very brief thing at the start. And like Chris was saying, most people listening to podcasts aren't just sitting down listening to your podcast with their eyes closed, like to pay attention to the whole thing. They're taking their dog for a walk, they're washing the dishes, they're driving, they're doing something in which they're going to be half listening, and you need some sort of tricks and tips to be like, how do we keep them knowing what's going on when they miss certain things?
It's so difficult, and Phil, you can talk to this as well. When specifically we've done episodes that are just pure combat. Like my biggest like pride that I've taken in an episode is in the Pop Cthulhu season, we do a combat that's entirely takes place on a train, and good God, as a first-time GM, I was like, it was a true learning curve where I didn't take a lot of pains to orientate my players in terms of who is where and what's going on, and there was like points where they were quite confused with it. But through the power of editing, all that gets streamlined. And for a listener, I've heard people say that it's like some people have said, hey, that's actually my favorite episode. And I go, thank God, because that was so difficult to get to a point, like, put the music in, put the sound effects in, tighten up those pauses, and really make sure that we're keeping the points that orientates the listener. And then that's how you create an engaging combat sequence that could otherwise just feel like okay, now it's my turn. What am I doing? What do I roll? Then 20 seconds of dead air while you're looking up a rule and just things like that.
And also with it being, that's hard enough when you're doing a visual medium to try and keep people engaged, but at least then you've got like a map, or you've got minis, or you've got something on screen that's like showing people what's happening. If they haven't been listening for 2 minutes and they go, oh shit, I wasn't listening, where are they? They can kind of bring themselves back in. If you're listening to a purely audio medium, how do you keep them knowing like what the structure of the battlefield is, or who's being shot at? Now I've just tuned back in and Ellen's rolling swinging a sledgehammer at someone. Who is she hitting?
I often don't know.
She's just swinging.
Yeah, I mean, the GM told me.
Theater of the mind. Theater of the mind is my favorite way to do combat anyway. I do a slightly hybrid thing. So I do theater of the mind with a map usually. So I usually not really a gridded map. So for Cyberpunk Red, I literally either got like Google Maps, and I was like, the first mission takes place in a building that I like found in Silicon Valley on Google Maps, and was like, that's the building, there it is.
Nice.
I'll just arbitrarily assign things. There's a fight that takes place in a underground car park, so I pulled a blueprint off online of a car park and said, this is the combat arena.
Right. Nice.
So there's enough to orient the players. They can see on the map what it looks like, and then by being conscious of an audience, we can translate that shared reality into our narration. So it's a little combination of good kind of theater of the mind practice and awareness that an audience needs like a little bit more of a crutch than we have.
Yeah. It's also something where we're very well aware, and we definitely look at TTRPGs as collaborative storytelling, and that is so much more useful in what we do as Roll to Cast, because we're fully aware that, hey, we can't say you, we need to say Ellen or Chris. We need to constantly be aware that there is no video component, and we need to be aware, especially in combat situations, right? Once we've done all the rolling and the mechanics of it, we then go through and then like say it all with the color, with the language, and with everything, so that we can constantly reinforce it, not just for the players, but for the audience as well. As like, this is exactly what happened, and constantly re-engage them with that.
Or you can just do a
Ellen.
season that is about kids running around in an Australian town. We don't have to do lots of complicated fights, or Chris, vampire. There's like a combat in there, but mostly it's about the scenes and the drama, right? So you don't necessarily have to deal with that stuff.
I find, I'm still, learning as a GM, and I still find spatial, orienting someone spatially is a big weakness of mine. It's not where my strengths lie in life and then in role playing games. But I've done a few workshops with my work and working with children, and a big thing is I love sensory kind of play and sensory experiences, so I try and keep that in mind for settings. I always want to try and evoke the feeling. If there's a way that I can capture some kind of deep emotional response to a place, so that no matter what the words I'm saying, you can kind of relate it to something that very deeply and inherently, from your own kind of experiences. I try and tap in a little bit of that, of, what are you smelling? What are you seeing? What are you feeling? What's the texture of this place? Just because, we don't have maps, we don't have screens, we don't have, all of those things. So you really want to just be like communicating that, and
it's something.
The cool thing is it's
having
all
to
of
be
in their imagination as well, similar to reading a book. Like it can be whatever they are imagining.
It can be whatever you want. If you don't over describe, because that's the other thing. You need to balance. You need to have all of those senses described. Like when you walk into a tavern, what does it smell like? What temperature is it? Is the air humid? All those texture and temperature things are important, but you don't want to over describe, because then you're kind of prescribing what the scene is for the person listening, and you're kind of taking away. It's like they say, you can't make a monster more horrific by showing it than you could if you hinted at it. Absolutely. Yeah, it's something I'm having to be aware of, because I've been doing Twitch Tales, an interactive D&D game on my Twitch channel every Sunday, and the chat is the one that controls the main character by like a hive mind sort of collective. And only after like 80 episodes of that did we finally put it onto a podcast. I've just got my own podcast up, and I'm taking all of these short rest interviews, I'm taking all of the Twitch Tales things, and we're just taking the audio and putting them as an audible thing, so that people who are like commuting can actually keep up with it as well. And there's been lots of like, oh, thanks for putting these on audio form, I can finally keep up with the story. But at the same time, we're listening back to those early episodes and going, oh, this was not intended to be audio only, because I'm referencing things that are happening on screen. I'm referencing maps and directions and stuff. And going forward, I need to be aware of when I'm doing a Twitch. I need to be aware that some people's not going to be listening to this. Some people are not going to be watching this. They're going to be listening to it later. So I need to be a bit more clear about naming characters rather than saying him and her and this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
you over there.
D&D is like the games we play aren't really kind of explicitly dungeon crawlers generally. Which
they
can
deliberately stray away from that, because
those things tend to get bogged down in an audio format. So
because you're like the second door on the right is a trapped one.
Yeah,
which door are we talking about? Yeah.
So we're more swashbuckling. We're more adventure, new place, different stuff. Yeah.
So you film for a couple of days. You record it. You then edit it. It takes roughly how long? 7 years. That's usually how long my editing takes.
I have worked out now that because I will do a rough cut of the episode, then I'll do like a sound effects pass, and then I'll end up with the music. That's kind of how I do it. Right. Although recently I've tried to go through time length now. That's how I used to do it. Now I go, I do like 5 minutes, do the sound effects and the music, and then I'll keep going that way. That being said, it probably takes me between 4 to 6 hours for an episode, probably closer to 6 once you include, importing, exporting, finding the sound effects, knowing where the music's going to go.
I was going to ask about that. Where do you get your sound effects from? Do you source them all from one place, or do you just Google chicken?
So I want to shout out Elliot J. O'Neill. Elliot J. O'Neill is a frequent collaborator of us. He does a podcast called The Simpsons Index. He's also done a audio drama anthology series podcast called Pulp Fury Radio. And I'm actually doing a Call of Cthulhu campaign with him over on the Dreaded GM channel.
Oh, nice. You with him?
Lovely man. Love him to death. Point being, he actually gave us access to his SoundSnap account, which is a website that you can pay for that has tens of thousands sound effects on there that are free to use, and it has been a godsend. Basically, you can type in anything, and generally you'll find it goes from short little seconds to like ambient minutes.
Filter by Door Creek, and then it's like, okay, I need to now filter by Wooden Door Creek. Wooden Door Creek. Old Wooden Door Creek.
Sometimes
metal
it's too
hinges.
much, right?
So when 17 different options.
I had a car chase. There's like a car chase episode in season 3, and looking for like just the right engine sounds for like cars versus the motorbikes versus.
Somebody turns up the next day. Phil, you look like you haven't slept. What? Is it morning?
The problem that I've had is that I go so meticulous. So I have ADHD, and it has been, as an editor, it has been such a crutch as well. Because what I end up doing is going, no. Every character must have their specific die rolling sound, and it has to be kind of tied to their character, and it must be the same every time. Because even if, like, I know the audience isn't going to know if I use the same door opening sound in episode 2 in season 2 as opposed to the Starfinder season, but I'll know. And that's the issue. So even like specific rooms had different door sounds, and I have to make sure I use the same one. Like it goes that's probably why it takes longer, because I typically have to like.
I'm surprised it doesn't
make
take
it
longer.
work for yourself.
Hey, like, as somebody who's done a lot of editing, when you said 4 to 6 hours per episode, I was like, oh, he gets through them pretty quick.
Yeah.
And you know what? If you find out what your workflow is and how to streamline it for yourself as well, and knowing, like, I can look ahead in a timeline, and I'll make like little mental notes while we're recording, going, oh yeah, there was a 5-minute pause here because there was a helicopter, blah blah blah, and like so you can like learn to work and know who has more pauses, who gives more ums and ers, who like, and mic technique becomes a whole other thing in terms of like learning how to do a podcast and learning how to edit. Like the amount of time you, like, someone needs to be closer, someone needs to be further away, someone has trucks that you could drive pauses through.
One needs to remember to
speak that you can drive trucks
in English.
There you go. Yeah, it's all that stuff is just so fascinating, and you learn how to make it easier for yourself by like anticipating those things. For myself, I say a billion times per episode. I've probably done it on this stream, and it's like Ellen is the loudest.
Yep.
Yep.
Phil is the quietest. All these things, and knowing our strengths and knowing our weaknesses too is also super helpful.
Yeah,
I use words in ways that they shouldn't be used.
I do that too. I'm like, there's a word that's. I do malapropisms a lot because I'm like, I know there's a word that's like this, and I say a word, and then I'm like, that's not what that word means.
And bless them, they usually know what I'm saying, and they'll go with it.
Get it from context, right? That's all language is.
Yeah.
In our latest episode of Die, there is a whole combat encounter that is completely ridiculous because I meant to say MP, and I said PM instead, and everyone jumped on it and said, "Are we fighting the Australian Prime Minister?" And I, instead of going, like, no, that's not what I meant, I said, yep.
Yeah.
That's fucking amazing.
That's the episode that I have to edit tonight.
I love that. That's great.
So that exists now.
That's not an advert
for. That's
not an advert for Die. Then I don't know what it is.
So back to the process. You get through your editing, about 4 to 6 hours, maybe a little longer, and then you upload it to what? Where do you go after that?
I mean, everywhere. Currently, we're using Acast, and that was a partnership and a platform we started using. It was a prize initially because we were nominated for an Australian Podcast Award, and we got the first year free. And when we started using it, we're going, oh, this is actually much more useful for our needs. We've been using Spreaker before that. We still filter it through Spreaker, I believe, because Spreaker is still a thing. But we use Acast to then put it onto Spotify, to iTunes, to Google.
It goes all over the place. And
everywhere.
Acast does that for you.
Yeah, everywhere. Yeah. We've had it on YouTube. Everywhere that we possibly can, we get it out there. We put it in the top and the tail of the episode where we say on your favorite podcatcher, and we try to stick by that.
And then how do you, after that point, I assume marketing comes up or scheduling it? What's the next part of the process once it's all uploaded and it's there? You schedule how far in advance are they scheduled?
At the moment, I'm editing on a week-to-week basis. We used to have a bit more of a backlog. Just the way that my schedule's kind of gone at the moment, I generally will edit the night before it releases. But I know that I can do that. So, like, that's stress that I put on myself. But I know that I don't have that stress.
The patrons get it a day early as well, which is
we have a weekly schedule that we hold. We don't. There's no season gaps. Every week there's an episode of Roltercast.
Yeah, I worked that out when you said that you'd been going 4 years and something about 200 episodes. I was like, that's no gaps in that time.
We have not missed a week.
We've not missed.
That's amazing. That is amazing consistency.
So we schedule. We go into pre-production for a season. We begin gathering marketing materials for that, and then in the season and in the lead up to that season, Ellen takes the marketing leadership there, and so the Twitter account is largely her work. And she promotes the podcast online.
Tears.
Gets us interviews and stuff.
Just
and
mainly
so that's sort of
reaching out and tagging people, and if you have, because we're dealing in a we're a podcast except for our monthly live streams, so people don't get the kind of visual stimuli, and so just putting our logo out there sometimes gets boring after a while. So it's really good to try and find some kind of promotional images per season. So
some of which are scrolling by right now.
Yeah. So you've seen that we've done some in-character photo shoots. We've commissioned some art. Just kind of mocking up graphics on Canva, anything to really kind of like draw the eye, and then we just try and keep releasing that throughout the season.
And also, Chris is very much our kind of like big picture thinker. Chris has a very like good eye for going, hey, like this is where we should be like looking. This is kind of what we should be thinking about. This is how, especially the pre-production side of things. Chris definitely spearheads that. You have like, he has got the directorial mind and the dramaturgical mind, and kind of definitely keeps us in line and kind of on the right direction in terms of like process from start to finish as like a whole like united thing.
We end up discussing like how agile we want to be, because we record a big batch and that takes months to come out. We then look ahead at what we're doing next, and we do things that we want to play, but we also, as we kind of hinted, we also kind of dovetail into what people want to hear and what's popular and what's buzzing.
That was actually the next thing I was going to ask. Like, what discussion is had around like what the next season is, what the next system is that you want to play? What kind?
We meet weekly. We meet every single week to discuss, how our numbers are doing, what our schedules are like, whether we're collaborating on any other podcasts, like ideas for stuff. So there's always discussions about what's coming down the line. And we tend to be looking a season, 2 seasons ahead pretty much at all times. But we tend to try and like finish recording something so that it's out of our heads. And then we get a bit more serious about what's next. But by then we've usually
like a big
decided
list of TTRPGs that you're like, we want to play this at some point in the future.
Probably in our heads, like I probably know about 3-4 games that I'd love to run, and I'm trying to like for example, we know what season 10 is going to be.
Our fans have a big list of things they want us to run as well.
I'd imagine. Yeah, a lot of people always get in
and
touch
a lot
with
of
me
that
to
we
be
try
like,
and fit into our live stream. We because we do variety TTRPG content on the podcast. Every month we have a live YouTube stream, and we play games that the Patreon membership votes on, and so we are always picking games nearly always picking games that we haven't played before. Like we're playing Mech Ton this month, which is like really crunchy, really Gundam, really like anime.
Big anime robots.
And that'll be fun. That'll be exciting. But it's also super new. So part of the reason why we meet so frequently and we chat so frequently is, well, part of like the message of the podcast, I guess, is to like peel back the often like, hey, playing a new game is really hard. It's like playing a new game isn't actually that hard. It's daunting it's really exciting, it's really fun, it's really liberating, but it's also less daunting after the first time you do it. That first step is huge. But like Ellen and Sean, their first like GM experiences were with Roltercast, and they've maybe run, what would you say, like 8 different systems
So
More?
between the four of us, I worked this out a little while ago. Between the four of us, we have played close to 50 different games.
Whoa,
Between the
that's-
four of us,
Yeah.
we played like almost 50 different TTRPGs, and I think
Jeez.
Ellen and myself have now like we've obviously, as you've said, Chris, we've accumulated like an amount of games that we've run between the seasons and the one shots that we've done. And like it's a muscle that you flex, and it's also as you see other people's GMing styles and the way they approach everything from pre-production to the actual game, you take those things on and you figure out what works for you and what doesn't. Like, am I going to be like Phil and write a whole fucking tome of a story for my podcast, or am I going to be like Chris and it just all comes from my fucking head for the most
It
part?
scares me that way.
And like I go like, well, which one works for me? And then you work like, and that's also very fascinating as well because that makes it less daunting. Like it's still terrifying, but
Still
you
has
like,
your campaign books.
yeah, but like it's been
That's
so
an
good to
expensive
like
hobby.
learn from everyone. Go like, oh, like Chris's approach to writing down a few specific things per scenes is really useful to me. The way Ellen goes about describing a scene and setting the players into it is really useful to me. The way that Phil like spends a lot of time in terms of just opening paragraphs and descriptors to set the scene for an episode is really useful to me. Use all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like we're learning like what's best practice for each of us too.
I
We
love.
try. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
I love just listening to other TTRPGs because just finishing Cyberpunk Red, I was so fascinated with the net running stuff, and I was like, I don't know what the hell any of this means because it's so I've not looked at the rules, I don't know anything about the system, but I was able to pick it up by the end of 21 episodes or whatever it was of like various basically what you were rolling for. You were using all sorts of acronyms that I'm not used to being used to D&D. I was like, okay, so DV is probably something like difficulty value because he's using it in the same context of like a DC would be in D&D, and you're able to pick things up and then not only pick things up but like steal from it for your own ideas. I'm going, oh, that's fantastic. I haven't really thought about a skill check that requires that kind of a thing in D&D. So maybe I'll use that and steal that for my games. And just stealing from other systems is one of my favorite things about playing other systems. In order to basically make this hybridized, homebrewed version of a system that I want to play with all my friends, and be like, I don't like this. I don't like death saves, so get rid of them. Or I don't like this, so get rid of them. Or I like how this system does combat more than D&D. So I'll take all of that combat and instead replace it just organ transplant style.
And it's like kind of fun to look at, things that you can put no matter what game occurs. Like I know, so I'll use Chris as an example again. One of the things that I've tried to use in some of my games, and I think I used it in Starfinder a bit, is for both Avatar and Vampire, Chris goes, right, here is like a 5-10 minute window where your characters can sit down. What would they talk about? What's like here? It's like going, here's a short role playing opportunity for you guys. That's the way to like reorientate yourselves and also like figure out where your characters are, where they're progressing. Also like look at what's just happened. And it's a nice little like campfire moment, literally in Avatar and figuratively in Vampire. And I go, oh, that's so good to like carve out a time for your players to actually just get their heads around everything.
It's one of my favorite things about Dreaded GM. You mentioned them earlier. They're one of my favorite GMs for that reason. They'll give you like a roleplay moment and be very specific and clear about, hey, time to roleplay, time for you guys to roleplay, and they'll just tell you. And I'll be like, sweet, let's have a little roleplay moment.
Yeah, there's the things that you pick up. Oh, sorry. You want to jump in, Phil?
No, I spoke loads. You go.
I was just gonna say we do have the kind of inherent things that we like to do as you learn your toolbox as GMs and players, but also a thing that we talk about a lot in Roll to Cast is what makes each system really unique.
Right.
Like what
That's what I'm
pops
talking about.
off
This is what I was going to
yeah,
talk about.
and how does the because it's yes, you have the lore and everything, but the game specifically is kind of trying to teach you how to play it. So there should be, that will kind of dictate a lot. That'll dictate, tone and what kind of atmosphere you want to create for your players, and how much agency they have in a game like Kids on Bikes versus Vampire the Masquerade, where constantly you're kind of losing control of your own capacity versus something like Kids on Bikes, which is very collaborative, and the GM is much more like facilitator kind of, volleying back to you. Well, what do you think? What do you think's happening in this town? So there's things like that we always try and shine a light on in each season of Roll to Cast, of what's really kind of cool and special about this game.
Nice quick fire question for you. What's been your favorite system of the 9 that you've done as part of the seasons?
Well, Sean, you have to go. Do you want to go first?
Oh yeah, Sean, you have to go
first. Honestly, my favorite system that I've played is you know what? I reckon it's gotta be Pulp Cthulhu. Because here's the thing, to answer your question from ages ago, I pick really crunchy systems, but I love the lore. I pick them based on the world and how kind of enamored I am by the setting and want to actually dive into and really pull out a juicy story from. And Pulp Cthulhu for me, gave me a chance to let my players be very kind of bombastic and over the top and just go kind of nuts, which is what I love to kind of facilitate. But by the same point, it brings me down to what I loved as my influence, which is very much Indiana Jones, very much Brendan Fraser's The Mummy. It's that kind of swashbuckling, it should be in a museum sort of style of play. And so that was really, and then to mix that with existential dread and horror and awfulness I love the melding of the worlds. And to be honest, D100 system is my absolute favorite. I love a D100 system. So that's kind of me.
Nice.
And on that note,
and that's
thank you for sticking around, Sean. Sean has to disappear now, but the rest of them are going to be sticking around. Thank you very much for spending the time, Sean.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. I love it. And I will keep this camera on so it doesn't mess up all the other cameras.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
If you guys want some variety, if you want, I can run downstairs in between questions.
Yeah, if you can just jump into the different cameras.
Jump in between cameras.
I want a Sean impression though every time.
Bye, Sean. I'll draw on my beard.
Nominate someone to answer next. Oh, he can't hear us anymore.
He's gone. I will nominate. I'll roll a D3.
No! You lost Roll to Cast. There we go.
Good work, Sean.
There we go. Perfect. Look at this.
That's brand recognition there.
Brand recognition.
Perfect.
There you go. And then I'll crop it in like a Totes Profesh.
Totes Profesh.
My goodness.
Totes Profesh. Look at this.
Look at this.
All right, Ellen, you're going. Best one of the 9 that you've put out officially as the seasons.
I mean, any ones that I don't GM are great because I don't feel like I'm gonna poo my pants and cry every 5 seconds. But having said that, I have been.
You got an interesting stress response.
Yeah, it's both at the same time. No, it's the season we're currently releasing, Die, is a game that I've been frothing over. I was a Kickstarter. I love the comic series that it's adapted from. I love the comic author who made the game. And I've just fallen in love with this system. And I cannot stress enough how exciting it was to jump into a game that is so narrative rich, but it's in terms of mechanics, you can do pretty much anything. So, that's a bit of added stress as well, because it's like, well, you can kind of do anything. So it's up to us as creators to, tell an effective story the best we can. And we have 2 guests for that season. We have Max Garcia Underwood, who's an actor and musician who scored our Witcher season, and we have Luna Luboffen, who's obviously an amazing TTRPG creator. And I just cannot stress enough how the whole cast really just jumped into it, like guns are blazing, and we're totally ready to just pick up the baton and run with this system and get really excited about the system. So I love Die.
It must be quite. We'll come back to this obviously, as I want to get the others' answers about their favourites. But it must be quite an interesting difference to run for 5 players when you're used to running for 3 in this this usual setup. Phil, let's go you next. What's been your favourite season in regards to the
so
system?
I'm gonna cop out and choose a few. So I love playing Avatar, Avatar Legends. I think as someone who's not a huge fan of Powered by the Apocalypse, I think the central mechanics of Avatar actually used the system really, really well. It was great fun to get into the real teenage melodrama of it, and like influence each other's emotions and like plead with each other to like, you know, have courage and you know, face up to the demons of the past and stuff. It really felt like living in a show with these like really overwrought like teenagers living with stakes that are way beyond what they can control, and their emotions sliding between these two extremes that they're trying to balance. It really felt like the TV show. So I love doing that.
Cool. And that's the one you get, Chris. What?
Hey.
Just...
Look,
Got him.
Got him.
I think my answer is probably based on my favorite moment. So I'm gonna pick my own season that I ran, which was Vampire the Masquerade, which you've just listened to. In there's a moment where Phil gets up from the table and thinks that Ellen and I were conspiring against him, the player.
Yeah.
It leads me to like this bigger point, which I think is like systems tell stories, and like the systems that you pick are fantastic telling certain stories. They limit you in what you can talk about and what you can't talk about. And so by having this like wide scope of different games, you have these different kind of moments, and you have these different events. And Vampire the Masquerade, this game built on horror and dread and tension and this fear of yourself and the other and the unknown, led to this moment where a player like Phil stood up from the table and like was freaking out as a player, which was, you know, and we work safely, so, you know, no lines or veils or anything like that was crossed. But it led to this fantastically authentic moment where it was a sincere response. A great affecting thing from the game happened in this story. Phil, you're all good, aren't you? It's a good moment.
I'm fine. Yeah. I was only paranoid. I was only paranoid within the game of the you know, world of the game. Had it turned out that Ellen had actually planned a big betrayal, and screwed over our characters, I would have been down for that. I think it would have been awesome. But I was like really invested in the fiction, so I was freaking out. Like I wasn't like in danger of you know, having my own breakdown. But I really thought
it's those sorts of things that I think you know, like Phil says, Avatar Legends allows for sweet kind of teenage sincere moments. Cyberpunk is like balls to the wall. The stakes are real. Vampire is full of dread. Kids on Bikes is sincere and kind of Spielbergian. Our Starfinder season plays a lot, or listens a lot, like a traditional kind of Dungeons and Dragons season, but just in space. So all of these systems mean different things from a kind of the message. The medium is the message sort of vibe.
Yes. And you've done a real good job of highlighting there, like the different feel for the different systems. But mechanics speaking, what's been your favorite single mechanic in any one of the games? Is there like a particular death save or a particular mechanic of like losing yourself with a certain? I know there is in Call of Cthulhu where you're like losing your sanity, or in Vampire the Masquerade there's like your hunger and that sort of turns you into.
There's a running thing of my characters going crazy.
It happens in Pulp Cthulhu and Vampire.
So in Pulp Cthulhu, I play this really sweet Norwegian inventor who's like really positive and happy, and generally like a good jolly fellow. He's got, you know, some nice red cheeks kind of guy. And then one of the insanity mechanics is like your personality inverts.
Oh no.
So I got to play like a really grumpy, like angry version of the character. That was a lot of fun. I really like prompts like that where you go, okay, your character
like,
has
play this now.
Your character's had a very affecting moment. Make it make sense within the roleplay, and that's a challenge, and you have to do it. And I really like those.
One of my favorite things in D&D is actually the personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws that most people just forget to fill out on a character sheet. But I think they're one of them. it's a role playing game. They're the role playing aspect of the game. They're all of the stats are just the G of RPG. That little box in the corner that takes up a quarter of the page is your RP. That's your RP part of RPG. Yeah. And I think it's really important. And if I'm playing with a group of players who I can trust to be good role players, one of my favorite things to do whenever they get a curse or something like that, instead of giving them a curse that's like, whenever you roll a 20, you have to take the little high, like anything mechanics, boring stuff. If you give them a flaw that says, hey, you now this curse means that while you're cursed, you have this following flaw. Nothing. Grass doesn't look as green. Beds aren't as comfy, and because that's literally one that I gave to one guy. He got pulled back from death. They resurrected him, and I was like, you can't come back from death without some kind of lingering something.
Everything's washed out.
I gave him the flaw of like, now you've tasted, and it was summed up as, now you've tasted heaven, nothing's as good anymore. And he just role played it really well as like, what the fuck is the point? Nothing's got, like, my favorite foods are bland in my mouth and stuff like this.
Yeah.
In the same game, I'm giving, like, some guy's got some evil artifact that's super powerful, and so I'm tempting him every time he uses a charge from one of these powerful things. It increases the DC of the check he has to make every night for going crazy, and he's now up to 4 corruption points. He doesn't even know what that means, but every time he gets a corruption point, I give him another one of these things saying, your weapons and armor are now the most important thing in your life. You will forego sleep and food in order to protect them and stuff like this. And he's just role-playing it super well, because I think that giving somebody a role-play, a prerequisite for their role-play is really... It can be really freeing in a weirdly counterintuitive way.
Yeah, restrictions often make freedom.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love it.
Part of, going into something as an actor is going, okay, what's my given circumstances? Like, what is this person aiming for, and what are they acting against, and what are they dragging with them? And I feel like games set you up for that really well if you kind of lean into that. It's the whole thing of Kids on Bikes has a great thing where each of your stats is represented by a different die in the gaming set. So your highest stat is your D20 and your lowest stat is your D4. But having said that, dice explode in Kids on Bikes, and the creators,
so the lowest stat has more chance of exploding.
But the creators have said, and they can keep exploding as well. So the creators said they did that because it is Spielbergian. It's got that sense of those movies where sometimes the brainy kid, someone gets
he's going to be the one to lift the truck off of the other guy
under rubble, and they just dig deep, and it happens, and those extraordinary moments happen in that kind of genre.
I like that, because if you get if you're rolling a D4 for your weakest thing as you're a weak little weakling, you've still got a 25% chance that explodes into something else. And you're like, boom, now instead of rolling a D4, I've actually got a quarter chance of getting a 1, 2, or a 3, and a quarter chance of getting 5, 6, 7. And a 1 in 16 chance of getting 9, 10, 11, and onwards.
We just as well die as a game, which, again, every player has a unique die, so each of their classes is based on one of the dies.
I've played
I got
Star Wars themed game for that.
I got a special set for each of my players. Phil just showed his there. But so each of the classes has a kind of weird, almost game breaking mechanic like that, and particularly the dictator, who is the D4, is essentially like your fucked up bard. It's like, what if bards, but if everyone was shit scared of the total power that bards have to influence people's minds with their words. And so it's the thing of the dictator has such a powerful ability. You really got to temper when they use it, because they can use their voice on someone to make them feel an emotion. But because they've got a D4, it's like you can roll really high with that.
You could actually get the
effect.
And you can do it so much that they are permanently fucked. Like they feel that emotion forever. You have totally broken them. So it's like, it's one of those things you're like, we gotta be careful with that.
He's using the voice. Everybody down.
How about you, Chris? What's your favorite mechanic from one of the systems?
I'd say I think I agree I think Phil brought it up earlier. The Avatar Legends, so the Last Airbender game, has that balance system. So it's your characters are somewhat are these kind of archetypes drawn between these two ideals, these two kind of concepts. You know, whether that, I think for Phil, your character was strength and care or something like that.
Force and care, yeah.
Force and care. So this character, in this case, Phil's the hammer, had these two kind of ways about navigating the world. They had these two ways of viewing the world, and this manifests in a bunch of different ways. You know, should you act in this way or should you act in the counter way? That, for me, is a big thing. As someone who's primarily a director, not an actor, I'm always looking at systems which enable role playing more organically. I've worked with a lot of young people, especially, and some kids absolutely love it. They dive straight into the role playing. They're little thespians. They love getting the performance out. They love acting. Others are very anxious about that, aren't very good at role playing, aren't very good at role playing. And so for me, that game has that fantastic balance thing where, as the characters do more in alignment with this ideal, it begins to color how their character acts. So they get bonuses to it, they get better at it, but also they lose the capacity to do these other things. And so even when they try and accomplish those things, they do so at a negative, and so it impacts their role playing in a way that I think is really, really excellent. It's also a system which doesn't allow you to say, in the old school, it's actually in the D&D rules that you can't just say, I make an investigation check. You have to describe what you're doing. It's in the book. And same with Arcana and Nature. It's like, okay, I check for tracks or whatever. Okay, now make a nature roll. But this is very explicit. You can't just go, I do this skill. You have to describe it first, and then you make the roll, and does it succeed or fail? That's up to you now. So it enables role playing. That's why I think it's a great system. But yeah, like there's so many good systems out there. They all, I don't know. I love Fiasco. That's a fantastic game.
That's one that's been
played it a few
for
times
while.
on Rollcast Live as well.
Yeah.
From what you were saying earlier about backgrounds for characters, I want to shout out the Cyberpunk system's life path system. So when you make a character, you go through like what friends they have, what enemies they have, and if you're and you answer a bunch of questions, like say you're a med tech, it's like, okay, what does your clinic look like? Is it like pristine and clean, or like would people like walk in and be like, oh my god,
like,
this
I'm
is
gonna get cut up here.
I'm gonna get instant
infection.
infection in here. Like where do most of your clients come from? Do you service like high-end people on the sly, or are you a street doc for gangers and stuff? So each role has its own individual things, but there's also like general ones. So everybody's gone through some sort of family crisis. Everybody has, had something that's knocked them down to the bottom of the rung. And so before you even start, you've got this shape of a life. And I think sometimes characters for RPGs can kind of arrive fully formed. And just sort of like their history is a bit lost. It's like they're here, they're ready. They just are.
But who are they?
And I think, I think Cyberpunk does it. RTG really well, that they make sure that there's a path for you to get there. It's a bit like Traveler in that way, that you have to carve out a meaningful past that kind of puts you into the present, so you're ready to continue that into the game.
Phil and I have been playing Cyberpunk Red for quite a while now, because we do it at Sirenscape. Phil's even wearing the merch.
That's Ellen, and that's me.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, like you said, these are characters who are very much in the world. So like nothing is fully set in stone, but you have a good idea of where they've come from. And in the 11 seasons our Sirenscape campaign has run for.
Wow.
Like it's so interesting because like a few of us have gone back and added to that life path, or like really fundamental things. So like my character Ali, who is a rocker boy, started out as like very selfish and like had a relation with one of the other one of the other players, in that they were exes. They broke up, and they were like, it's better that we just stay friends. And then throughout like the 11th series has actually gone back and gone, actually no, she's the most important thing to me.
Wow.
And like now they're back in a relationship. So it's like, it's really nice because you have characters who are really primed to react to things like real people do and change and, you know, have the world influence them.
Excellent. I have a few things that I still want to discuss before we run out of time, but we are getting to half an hour to go.
We've got some really cool questions from chat.
Yeah, so with half an hour to go, I like to remind the chat that I have been ignoring you the whole time. Deal with it.
Because he doesn't love you anymore.
It's because I don't love you, and I never did. No, what I want to remind you is that for 50 channel points, which you definitely have by now if you've been watching for an hour and a half, you can redeem Ask a DND question. It goes into a redemption list. That way I can open that up in about 10-15 minutes time, and we can go through your chat questions to ask the cast as well. So if you do have your own burning questions that I've been ignoring, make sure to put them in the chat using the D&D question. Wraith says, I'm used to it. Yes, as one of my mods, Wraith would be used to it. Some of the things I want to ask about, though, is so to get back to the topic of like the player size number. Playing for 3 is pretty ideal, I find. I usually like playing games for 3 people, because especially if they're all role players, because they can all have a decent amount of time between them. There's with a triangle of players, essentially, you've not just got 3 relationships, you've got 7 relationships going on. They've got the individuals of all 3 of them, then you've got the ones that are pairwise between them, and then you've got the group dynamic. And so to have time to flesh out all 7 of those relationships, who this person is as an individual, who they are with that person, who they are with this person, and who they are with the whole group, it's a pretty ideal number. 4 is still pretty ideal because it's kind of the classic D&D party size. Like 4 people kind of fill niches a lot more easier than 3 people do. You can quite easily find gaps within a 3-person party. How did you find doing most of your seasons as 3 people, and when did you decide we should get a guest star in for this season, or we should get 2 guest stars like with Dai?
You want to start with Dai?
I can answer the first one, because Phil, you haven't had any guests.
No, I've just done the 3 for this.
It's just the 3. I've only had one, which was for Avatar Legends, and the only reason we brought on a guest was because the guests, the players weren't as familiar with the setting as we were. From memory, we were rushing. It's not the only reason. That's reductive, but it was the major reason. The players, Ellen, Sean, and Phil, weren't as familiar with the setting as I was, and we weren't stepping into the game.
With you all that you don't know Avatar less than that.
I mean, I do know it. I just wasn't as like deep into it as Chris.
Sean hadn't seen the show.
Sean didn't know anything.
I'm glad that he's gone. I'm glad that he's gone.
Yeah,
he's not allowed. He's not allowed on. I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to cut the whole first half of the interview.
I had seen all of Avatar, but I had only watched a few episodes of Korra. And it had been like a while.
Yeah. But she was an expert. She was
Zola.
We brought in Zola, who was an expert and had great knowledge of the setting. And since every season we were rushing a bit because we were looking to catch the release date of that game as well.
Right. Yeah.
We got an early copy of that game as well, thanks to being on the Kickstarter. Ellen was a Kickstarter of that game, and so we got an early copy of the game. We were releasing the podcast earlier than most people had even had a chance to play it. So we had to learn the system really quickly, which meant when system becomes a priority, setting becomes less of a priority, or vice versa, depending on which one you're familiar with or not familiar with. This system did need a little bit of time to get across, so we brought in a 4th who knew the system very well. But 3 is, I tend to think, really ideal, really good is 3.
Excellent. And Ellen?
I can speak to Dai because in that we want to showcase every single game system and what makes it unique. And I think a really unique thing about Dai is that you use
every cast has a different
die
dice
from a dice set. And I was like, well, it'll be weird to miss out on
to have
on
only
one
three
of
of those die.
Also, I love having other femme performers come to the table. And I've wanted to bring Luna on for
Luna's
quite
fantastic.
a while.
She's great.
And just like really brought a wonderful kind of warmth and energy to the table. But yeah, the main thing is like I really want to showcase this game, and it needs those people. So that
Nice.
kind of
We always
forced
kind of
my
come
hand
back
there.
to our core, right? And then sometimes we just need an injection of a bit of a different energy. It can kind of help keep things fresh and
Yeah,
and
we're like an
exciting
open
and stuff.
relationship that way.
That's right. Yeah.
You know.
I'm going next,
We
and I'm
stray,
again not
but
having
we
a
come
guest.
back.
So apparently, I'm the monogamous one, which doesn't make any sense.
No, doesn't. No.
Yeah.
So when it comes
it just
to
happened that way.
when it comes to having the guest stars on, how you said you reach out to Luna because you've respected her and whatnot, but generally speaking, how do you decide? Do you have a pool of people that you're like, I really want to work with this person at some point, and then you find a system that's kind of going to work with them?
Well, because we record live, we record in person, right? We don't record over the wires because it doesn't really work for the kind of level of intensity we want to reach. So they kind of have to be people who can get to Adelaide physically, which kind of narrows things down a little bit. But we're in the community here, so we have a bunch of people who we respect and want to work with. Luna is an Adelaide-based performer, right? And so we had connections with her that way. So it seems natural. It's like, hey, we want to collaborate with you. Come along. And then my name is, I'm having an ADHD
Solar,
name.
Max Goodman.
Goodman. He was. Goodman is over in Melbourne, but he'd done a bunch of seasons for us. They'd appeared. He was making a podcast called One Good Thing, which is about finding good things in bad movies. We'd guested on that.
Right.
He was doing the music for our seasons. They're people they're usually people we have some sort of relationship with that we respect as performers, and we think, hey, we love your energy. Let's have it on. That's kind of the selection process. I would
the
say.
season comes first, though.
Yes,
the season comes first, and then we see what's missing, and then if someone can be injected to build up an area.
Yeah,
the story is always king, right? The product, the story is it's not like we're not like making Adam Sandler movies. We're like, these mates haven't been in a movie for a while. Let's get them on. We come up with like, what story do we want to tell first, and how do we tell it the best we
Let's
can?
not rule it out. If we could do Rollcast and do it in Hawaii with a bunch of mates, we probably
would. Yeah, we probably would.
We're not making Adam Sandler films here, not by lack of trying though.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I bloody wish.
Wish we had his money. All right, last two things I want to talk about is the future of future Rollcast. After Die, what's next? What can you give me an exclusive on?
Can't tell you.
What can you tell? You can give me something. Give me the type of theme or how many players.
We can tell you that it's a theme that we've dealt with before. It's a setting not a setting that we've gone to, but it's in the kind of.
So it's not like
Cyberpunk
Cyberpunk Red. It's not like return to the same.
No.
It's a system that we haven't played before, at least on the podcast, and it is aligned with like what we've talked about in this interview about how we like to be really agile. Thank you, Phil, for someone's going to slow it down, man. Or recognize it from the. It's aligned with. I think we're releasing it in October. So.
Can we say, and I'll field this to Chris, can we say what the cast will be like?
In terms of like just the four of us?
Yeah.
I just wanted to know if we could say
No. We're not having any guests. It'll just be the four of us, back to the OG four.
Who's jamming it? Can you tell us that?
Me.
Phil is.
It's a Phil
Me,
one.
and it's one of my favorite franchises.
There
you
go.
can figure that out because it's usually, unless we, need to pivot like we did with Cyberpunk Red, it's usually the same order.
Yeah. And if you go on Phil or my Twitter account, we've been talking about it incessantly.
There you go.
People
Plug
just
for
haven't
other
clicked
socials.
that there's
You
a
get it.
game for it.
Right. There you go.
Yeah.
So now we
I think that's enough clues.
So now that's a lot of clues. We can work it out from this.
Say anything. I don't want to say anything.
I'll get it out of
I'm
Ellen
so
privately
nervous.
later.
The only
can't get
reason for that
anything out of it.
secrecy is we like to build the
suspense. I get it.
Suspense,
I get
especially
it.
amongst
I'm in
our
the
core
industry.
crew,
I get
right?
you.
We have a Discord where people like to speculate on these things. So
and we release it early to our Patreons. They know well ahead of time before anyone
I'm
else.
sweating because I feel like maybe I've already told you.
It's like, oh god, what have I said?
And I don't know if he's got a long memory, but I'm banking on not.
I got a good memory. If you've told me something that's said in confidence, I don't tell anybody. It goes with me to the grave.
Yeah, it would have been in confidence.
Gotta stop thinking about it so I don't slip anything. Anyway, the last thing that I want to talk about is you mentioned before, or Sean mentioned, I think, that you got your first year of Acaster as an award for winning some award. You've also won an Emmy that has not been mentioned at any point yet. Let's talk about the awards that you guys have won and how the process was of like getting nominated and what it was like to get nominated. How did you was it voted on by the public?
So we've been in two awards. Yeah, so the Acast was a award for being nominated in the Australian Podcast Awards. Right. We were nominated in the category of best fiction, and we lost to the overall winner of the year of best podcast.
Nice.
So,
I
mean, if you're gonna lose, you're gonna lose to the best. Yeah, if you're gonna get knocked out, if you're gonna get knocked out of the tournament in round one, you want that person to go on to win the whole thing. So you can be like, we're knocked out by the best.
I would also like to mention that of all of those podcasts, we were the only ones not really behind a paywall or part of a larger corporation or company.
Right.
The minimum budget for every other podcast in that area was $50K.
Yeah.
So we did very well.
Win. Yeah. And
That's
Chris
amazing.
went over to Sydney for the actual award ceremony.
So you got nominated for that? What? How long ago was this?
Kiss some babies.
That was a couple of years ago now. That one.
And that was after
we
how many
entered again
seasons?
this year. So the process for all those is generally kind of similar. That they call for a kind of sizzle reel, either of one episode or several episodes from the previous year, essentially. Right. And you have to self-select something either from a single episode or from multiple episodes that kind of highlights what you do. The Aussie podcast one, I think, is fully like in-house, both nominations and choices, whereas Annie's is a bit different. So the Annie's is they have a bunch of people that they choose to do the shortlists, the nominations, and then once the nominations are out, it's popular choice, which is really interesting for the podcast space because people are kind of fans of a podcast in a way that they aren't of like the category of best art. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Someone could be like, oh, I looked at all these TTRPGs this year, and this one had great art. It may not be my favorite RPG, but I'm going to vote for that. Yeah. Whereas like your audience is your audience for, and so that's a little bit strange. But it was a really
best podcast. It's going to be like it's mostly going to be a correlation of who's got the biggest audience because they're going to vote for their audience. They're going to vote for their.
But we used it as a prompt to like really push our social media and galvanize our fans and be like, please vote for us. And they did. They really got behind us, and we got the silver prize for that. Yeah.
Nice.
Do you guys want to add anything to that? I kind of rambled over it.
No, that's good.
No, you covered pretty much everything. I just want to say it was a huge push in terms of media. I know Sean was like messaging everyone he knew, and it was really it was a really scary thing because we were like, oh, it might come down to a popularity contest, and in terms of people nominated, where we do good numbers, but we don't have some of these other backings, and so it was just really lovely to see all the people and all the fans kind of turn up for us. So
what was the actual like award ceremony situation like? Was it something you could attend in person?
So who knows?
It was America, and the stream was not great. I have to say.
Yeah, it did drop out a lot.
That sucks.
Yeah. We filmed a video to play, but I don't think they could get the video working.
No.
So I don't know.
I've got a bunch of friends who are nominated for the Crit Awards this year, Gen Con, and I'm so excited to be going to Gen Con as well. So there's a bunch of them that are nominated, and I know a lot of them are like scrutinizing who they're up against in their categories and being like, how much of an audience have they have? They've only got 1,000 on Twitter, and
Yeah, we did that.
Yeah.
We did exactly that.
Yeah. It's not the funnest part of the industry, but
no, but it is what it is.
A part of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is pretty much all the time that I have for my topics and things. So I'm going to open up the redemptions list here and see what questions have been coming in from the audience. You guys can be getting your questions in for at least the next 5-10 minutes. So if you do have questions that come up, please do make sure to post them. 2 hours ago, we got a question from Wraith saying, Ellen, how is it playing Robert's sister? Referencing Dragonlance. And how often do you want to beat him? And why is the answer always? I'm not projecting here.
I have a smart ass answer, but I'm gonna forget that because it's honestly quite a joy to play with Rob as a player. And the whole Dragonlance game of us as siblings, I think, creates such a tasty dynamic. It always brings the drama. And yeah, Rob's just such a fucking interesting player because I cannot think that way, man. Like, I'm not a physics and maths kind of guy.
I'm a very
and to
specific
see you
kind of
yeah, but to see you come up with ideas and then fully execute them is just like a joy, because it's like, who the fuck would have ever predicted, you essentially making a magic cannonball?
Yeah. I found about my playstyle is that I'm basically an optimized min-maxer I'm an optimized min-maxer who puts roleplay first, strangely. So I can't have a character sheet with features and traits and spells and stuff that they're all on the list and they're all there, and I'm like, I've got to use every one of these things today, especially if it's a one shot. I'm like, I have to use everything on my sheet. But I can't do so just for the random nature of doing it. I need a roleplay reason to do so. So I'll find a reason in character to use this thing and to make it work to the numbers, to maximize the numbers, but still in the sense of this is the character doing it, not the player.
Yeah.
I found another one of me. This is awesome. Yeah, I'm exactly the same.
I was wondering how long it would take for you to complete. Very happy to finally make it happen.
So yes, anybody who doesn't know, we're talking about Dragonlance. Dragonlance is a campaign that Ellen and I both play as in over on GM Workshop on a Wednesday night over here on Twitch. Where all 5 of the players in that campaign are playing as brothers and sisters. I am one of a pair of twins, wizards, and in one particular episode, we had 4 guards up on a cliff that was overwatching the town, and we needed to kill them or get them out of the way or distract them in some way. And we had a catapult. So I used my transmutation skills to turn a gigantic ball of iron into balsa wood so that it was super light, then fling it from the cannon, and then snap my fingers and turn it back into iron so that it had all of the extra kinetic energy. And I had previously done all of the maths and physics on it because I do have a maths degree. So I did all of maths and physics on how much kinetic energy that would have. And then I realized that a ball of that size hitting with the force so that the catapult could throw it at would be the equivalent of 32 kilograms of TNT. And then I worked out the radius that would I worked out the radius of an explosion that would create, and then we decimated the cliffside, all 4 guards, parts of the forest behind them. and needless to say,
playing with Rob is a delight.
And I was a level 3 wizard.
Must be a nightmare.
I was a level 3 wizard when we did that. That was a lot of fun. Wraith also asks, of those almost 50-ish games that Sean was saying you have all collectively played, has there been a favourite of you, or one that you loathe to the fiery pits of hell? Has it sparked any of your creativities in wanting to make your own TTRPG? So lots of questions there. Of all 50 games, not just the ones that you've done as the 9 seasons, what is your favourite TTRPG? What is your least favourite TTRPG? And have you ever considered making your own TTRPG?
I don't think I have a least favorite. I'll say unless I'm going to look through the streams, old streams, and see if there's one that I didn't particularly enjoy. See if it doesn't spark joy. I don't think so. There were certainly some really exciting ones, but I think my all-time favorites. I really liked The Gardener is Dead that we played very recently.
Very fun. That was a beautiful little cozy Sunday morning game.
Is it like a one page RPG, or is it
more or less?
It's like 10 pages, but it's yeah, it's very collaborative. You create a gardener together, and
then you kill him.
You know, by the end
By
of
the
the
end,
game,
yeah.
the gardener will die. But you know,
wow.
you go through the seasons. So each kind of player takes a season, and you draw
that's cute.
cards. And the cool thing is that it's you draw the garden. So as each new
nice.
detail happens, you know, you start with a blank page, and then suddenly by the end you have this map of your
Yeah,
little
we did
garden.
a
Reminds
hotel
me-
garden on the rooftop of an old New England hotel.
Oh,
So
nice.
Yeah.
it's very cool.
Yeah.
It had a
reminds
kind
me-
of Hill House kind of, not a Bly Manor kind of feel to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it called? You guys might know. It reminds me a lot of another TTRPG called like the last year, the Quiet Year. I think it's called the Quiet Year.
Mhm.
You heard of that one?
Oh,
It's a deck of
yes.
cards, and you use the
On my
seasons.
list.
So like each of the suits is a different season, and you've
Yeah.
you've shuffled each
Yeah.
suit individually, but you do put them in suit order. And you start with a blank map, and you draw them, and each card is representing a different thing on the map. And
It's very similar. Yeah.
yeah.
But Morkborg also.
Oh, yeah.
Morkborg,
Very cool,
It's
yeah.
just amazing.
I don't know anything about Morkborg other than the fact that Dreaded GM constantly talks about it.
It's truly delightful.
It's so grim, man.
As someone who grew up on second edition, Advanced D&D, the lethality, the tone of it, the scrappiness of it, the significance of small things, the sense of adventure. It's a bit like going back to like, you know, it's like playing Breath of the Wild if you grew up on the original Zelda games.
Right,
The idea of like,
okay.
you have nothing, and that's what's delightful. Every new thing you discover is something to discover. So
Right, that's
it's a
cool.
really great game. Really recommend Morkborg.
Tonally, it feels
think
like
of it.
something like a Dark Souls or something,
Yeah.
where
Oh,
everything is
right.
decaying, everything is ending, and you're just kind of the sputtering of the light.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. So for me, I'm into Cyberpunk Red. It's like the biggest kind of part of me. I've run a bunch of campaigns. I have my own custom setting in there. I play in it regularly. I just love the game. It's great. I love
Nice.
Cyberpunk stuff. I love the attitude. I'm a bit of an anarchist myself.
You're very good at
It
it.
just-
Like the stories you ran for the first and third season, very, very.
Thank you.
grabbing.
Thank you. I love the setting. It feels very real to me. You know, when you do something enough, you just like, it takes on its own kind of reality. What I didn't enjoy so much, although the game itself was perfectly fun, was we did a one shot of the wrestling RPG. What is it
Worldwide
called?
Wrestling.
Well, it's called Worldwide Wrestling.
Yeah.
I don't get wrestling. Sean and Chris love wrestling. And I used to watch it when I was like 5, and I have not been into it since. So I really don't get it. So
Right.
that was, and it's also powered by the Apocalypse, which I'm not
Not a huge
100%
fan of,
either.
yeah.
So I felt a bit lost. With that
Okay,
one,
gotcha,
honestly.
gotcha. Ellen, favorite, least favorite.
I don't know that I have a least favorite. I will say, I ran Thirsty Sword Lesbians, and I did not feel super confident. It's another powered by the Apocalypse system.
Right.
It was also just like a really not great time in my life. So like, I
Right.
can't look back on that stream because I just like cringe at
Yeah.
how
Yeah,
stressed I was. So I'd love to like actually go back and play that game in a better headspace. So that's probably like
Sarah,
one of my.
you know Sarah Moore, right? I never remember who
Yes,
knows each other in
yeah.
this. You know Sarah Moore. She runs
Yeah.
Thirsty Sword Lesbians every so often. She'll be running a game for me at some point as well. I'm sure she'd have
Hopefully,
you on.
yeah.
I'm sure she'd have you on if you reached out and said, "Hey, I want to play."
I
it
would
again."
love that. I'd love
And
to.
she's a fantastic GM for those sorts of
get
systems.
my honor back.
Yeah.
But in terms of favorite, that's a nice dovetail as well, because they're both powered by the Apocalypse. I love Bluebeard's Bride. I will not shut up about it.
Bluebeard's Bride's great.
It's a gothic mystery game, and so much of it is about that. So much of it is evocative and gothic, and it's really about, kind of psychological horror and that kind of dream horror logic that I really love. I love when things make metaphorical sense as opposed to literal, figurative
Yeah.
sense. So Bluebeard's Bride is a great one for me, and especially because it feels so deeply feminine to me.
Right.
As a game.
We've
love that.
mentioned Powered by the Apocalypse a few times now, and there might be quite a few people listening that don't have a clue what that is. Does anybody want to field explaining what it is?
Not this guy.
It is a system that has you roll. It's a 2d6 system
instead of a 2D.
anything.
Yeah, so if you're used to D&D, which if you're watching my stream, you probably are. Instead of rolling the D20, you're rolling 2d6 for everything.
Anything between a 7 and a 9 is a partial success. Anything from a 10 to a 12 is a great success, and anything for a 6 under is a failure with some complications. That's effectively it. The big practice of it is that you describe the action, like you put a significant amount of description into it before the action happens.
Generally speaking, with Powered by the Apocalypse, you don't have the GM rolling dice. Usually, it's the GM only making decisions when you fail a thing or when you get a mixed success. You succeed with complications on a 7 to 9, which you're most often going to be getting. With 2d6 obviously averaging a 7. So yeah, half the time ish you're going to be failing, and then the GM gets to make a hard move or something, and then occasionally you're going to be succeeding, and you just whatever you were trying to do just succeeds. It's a very narrative way of doing it, but it doesn't have a lot of room for different mechanics, I guess.
Yeah, for me, the hallmark of the system and its various implementations is this move idea, where your individual character or class or playbook or whatever it is has moves, and they're things that you can trigger in certain circumstances. So, like in Avatars, like if you come face to face with your nemesis, you can do these 2 or 3 things. There's usually a shared pool of moves that you can always do. Like, again, Avatar is one that played the most. You can guide one of your fellows. You can give them comfort and guidance, right? And that changes their emotional state. For me, that's the downfall of the system, is that there are a million individualized rules. And I make the facetious joke of like, oh, if you go to a fishmonger on Wednesday, you can get 3 bonus fish. If you have recently cast a net, and I really, because you forget your own moves.
And everyone should listen to our longest running season, Avatar Legends. Go listen to the podcast now. And we have a bunch more questions, don't we, Phil?
Yes. Keep moving on. That's just my personal issues with it. I've aired them. I've
heard podcasts that use it in both good and bad format, essentially, to both good and bad degree.
Yeah, idiosyncratic.
It can definitely be a good system for certain stories, and it's not the right system for others, which is why I think it's important to play different TTRPGs. D&D with a D20 system, or Pathfinder with a D20 system, they're not the only way to do it. There's Sea of Thieves, which is a D10 system, and there's Powered by the Apocalypse games that use
2D20s.
There's all sorts of different systems that use different forms of
D10,
dice.
Yeah.
There's RPG systems that use just a pack of cards rather, or like a Jenga tower, or like there's other systems that use other things, and they are all better at telling certain types of stories within them.
Yes.
All right. The last question of that particular group of questions from Wraith was: have any of you ever thought about making your own TTRPG? Have you ever taken like bits from every system that you've looked at and gone, I kind of want to tell a story using my own thing, and just kind of put some stuff together?
I did when I was very young. I made a board game, which was TTRPG inspired. So me and my brother, I was 10, he was 8. We turned Clue, or for some people, Cluedo. Cluedo?
Cluedo in the UK, Clue in the US, I think.
Yeah, Miss White in the kitchen with a knife.
Yeah.
That game. We turned that into a battle royale, violent, kill each other game. Slash role-playing game. So you'd get bonus weapons and
it's basically PUBG, but in a Clue thing. You've got to run around.
Yeah, basically,
First one to find the pistol wins, essentially.
Yeah. If you got the knife, you got stealth moves, and you got to hide in particular areas. Nice. Very fun. I think the other one that I've kind of helped make was a Redwall, the Animals of Redwall game book series. There's a book series called The Animals of Redwall or Redwall. So that was that. And my partner is currently working on an Animorphs TTRPG.
Oh, nice.
At the moment. But that's actually already been made. So we're looking at getting in contact with people who made it and talking about how we could somehow help.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
I have no desire to. I mean, I would love to. I have no desire for anything. No, I love writing, and I love I hold my Kids on Bikes kind of like setting very near and dear to my heart, which is essentially just Australia. But I'd love to do potential writing for TTRPGs, but in terms of like making a game from the ground up, that's not where my strengths lie.
Fair enough.
So I always wanted to make a Stargate
a
TTRPG, because I think it just lends itself perfectly. There's different specializations. You can go on different episodic adventures to different places and solve problems. There's the tone of the show is very quippy and like laid back. So I think it's perfect, and then they're making one. So it's always eventually someone has the same idea.
About
it's on Kickstarter. They're making it now.
What was it? 2017, I think it was. So about coming up to 6 years ago, I was hospitalized for pancreatitis, and I was in there for a week, and that's when I first binged Avatar: The Last Airbender, because it's been on my list to watch for ages, but life keeps getting in the way. Eventually, I had nothing to do but sit in a hospital bed, so I watched the whole thing, and I was like, holy shit! And I was just getting into D&D, and I was like, I want to make an RPG for Avatar: The Last Airbender, and it was on my to-do list of like make yourself some time to like make an RPG for Avatar: The Last Airbender, and then it came out, and I was like, somebody did it, so I don't have to.
That's done. Yeah, I'm in the same boat though. I really like to. I really want to write some full materials for Cyberpunk Red, because it's the thing I spent most time in. I have some original characters and setting material already written, and a couple of campaigns under my belt. I would like to collect that into like a setting book, with campaigns and everything. Yeah,
awesome. One day. Concrete Forest asks, for those who are seeing you guys for the first time, is there an outstanding highlight you want to tell us? Outstanding highlight. Quick fire.
There's the big one in season 1. Everyone knows it if you listen to it. It's around episode 13.
Episode 13.
It's listen to the first 13 episodes of the podcast. You'll hit it. It's pretty big. It's a huge moment. Phil stepping out and yelling at the table was pretty fun in season 2 in the vampire season. What else?
Again, my season of The Witcher has a pretty big moment
season of The Witcher where tell you what,
non-spoilered highlights. This is like, it's like normally people put highlights into a what do they call them, like a trailer. This is a spoiler. This is a spoilered trailer. So everything is redacted. It's a trailer, but every scene is like muted or something. Like
none of it's out yet.
Love stories in Avatar Legends, the Avatar TTRPG. Having a teen romance was a lot of fun. The Starfinder, having an actively evil character in a party was a delight.
Nice.
All the stuff that's coming up at the end of the season of Die, man, that's not out yet. It gets super intense, super intense.
I won't
it's
say
amazing.
anything, but just as we were going through the epilogue of Die, I looked over and I saw my good friend Max, and he literally was making this face.
I was crying at the end of the season of Die.
His mouth was an actual like upside down smile. Like it was like I was like, oh no. Yeah,
there were quite
crying.
a few people who cried at the end of that season. It was great.
I think we were all crying.
Season 9, Die. Check it out.
So your highlights of the stuff that people who have not seen you so far is things that haven't happened yet. Good.
Yep.
Things that we can't talk about. And
things we can't talk about. Yeah.
I'll give my highlight
Intense
from the first 3.
Moments.
First 3 seasons, one of my highlights has got to be discovering Ellen as a psychopath. It's at some point in season 3. I won't give any context, so it's out of context spoiler. She annihilates somebody with a sledgehammer, and I've kind of alluded to it a few times with talking about sledgehammer. But it's not the fact that her character annihilates someone with a sledgehammer. It's the fact that Phil starts describing how you're annihilating someone, and Ellen goes into the most maniacal cackle that I've ever heard at the table as Helen.
I believe,
it's so gleeful and joyful.
The character's, not enjoying herself necessarily. No. I am. And I believe I say the words, ha ha, you have no legs.
Ha ha, you have no legs. Yeah, ha ha, you have no arm. Ha ha. It's
maybe a fun highlight from season 1 would be Ellen seducing a woman with like 3 exploding 10s off a
like
D10.
30 something.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. With a 50 on a D10 system. Which is impossible, which is insane.
Yeah. Can I say as well, in season 1, there is some actual diegetic singing from me because my character's a singer, and that was something I was really nervous about, but also I thought was a really cool opportunity. So there's music from the character herself, which is
nice.
cool.
And it's part of the plot, right? It's integrated.
Singing, seduction, and head smashing from Ellen.
Listen to the highlight.
Another highlight for me is just like just in the start of a new season going, I wonder what accents Ellen's going for this time.
Something she has no right to do.
I wonder what voice she's putting on. Yeah, I've got to say, Ellen, it took me a while to get used to I think it was French in season 2.
Yeah.
You know how hard it is to say certain terms in World of Darkness?
I was like, oh, this is a
coterie,
Coterie. And
season 4 has Ellen doing an Italian-American accent, so that's worth listening for.
That's super fun. I love doing that. I could do that all day long.
I have a very bad Norwegian accent in that season as well.
It's not bad. It's my favorite thing ever, Phil.
If we get accepted for it, Ellen and I are going to be doing an accent panel at PAX Australia this year. I have submitted it, and Ellen, me, and AJ. I'm also huge on accents and voice work, so I'll be doing like a panel with them.
But you can do them.
But I can do them. That's the change. That's the difference.
I got like 3 good ones in me, and the rest are like, here we go.
Let's try this one.
Here's
There's always a running joke in my family of like my mum can do Welsh and Pakistani, but neither one when she tries to do it. So her Welsh attempt becomes Pakistani and vice versa.
Yeah.
It's like, Mum, what is that? What part of Cornwall was that guy from? Scotland. Have you ever had to take a moment? This is from Ghost Swarm. Have you ever had to take a moment due to being in the role and you have to go, right, that was strong emotionally, I need to gather my thoughts and come out of the role before playing again? Like, kind of, I think this was inspired when we were talking about Phil having to get up and leave the table when you were, like, conspiring against him.
I've never had, I don't think I've had that moment.
A moment of going, that was too emotional or I was too much in the role, I need to take a step out.
I have a long storied history of LARPing. So being able to take characters on and off like hats is something that I think is really important. Yeah. And something that when I'm teaching my students about acting, something that I focus on is not diving far and getting too lost in a character.
Yeah.
It's just being able to go, right, I'm out of character now.
Take that off.
Take that off. So I haven't. I know. I think there's been 1 or 2 moments where we have, though, right? Has there been? Phil, you were mentioning for the most recent season.
So yeah, it's sort of not quite that, but in the most recent season, so because you make some real people who then go into a role-playing game and take on a paragon. So you make a real flawed human being, and then they get pulled into a TTRPG where they get superpowers, right? But the first thing is you start off with a real human being, and the stuff in the game is drawn from like their insecurities and stuff. So when you're making a character who's like a real life character from scratch, you want to put some of your own insecurities in there. You want to put some of your own, the things that you know and care about and are interested in. And you dial them up and you change the history and stuff. So it isn't exactly you. But the character I made for shares a lot of my anxieties and my anxieties for the future. And so in between this season, we did, because of scheduling, we did this over a few weeks where we did a full Sunday, and then we do another full Sunday, and then we do another full Sunday, rather than like a big block on the weekend. And in between those weeks, God, that character was in my head. It was in my head a lot, and I was thinking about him a lot. And sometimes I had to make a little bit of an effort to make sure I was divorcing his thinking from my thinking. It wasn't like that very intense in the moment. Oh God, I need a break right now.
Right.
But yeah, there was a little bit of bleed. But as Chris was alluding to, it's part of something you train as an actor when you approach something professionally. Part of that professionalism is the self-care to know where your boundaries are internally. You know, and the most famous kind of thing is that method actor who disappears inside the role, and I'm a big believer that's not a healthy way to perform, and so I don't really use that kind of toolkit. So I try to keep them separate.
I think I it's often like post seasons I find, you have kind of in the similar way that when you finish any big project, or we've all been in plays, and it's a lot of time where you are in this world, like you're in the depths of it, and then it's kind of over. So I feel like sometimes there's a bit of a come down from that for me personally, or definitely by the end, and as well for people watching, we do 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. recording blocks with like lunch and breaks in between. But sometimes at the end of those days, it's just like, I'm wiped. I just need to do something nice for myself, because I am I've put everything I can into it, and not, and I just need to do some self-care to kind of, pick myself back up and kind of recuperate from that, because it's emotional work, and it should be, because we want to tell stories we care about. So we should be bringing everything to the table, but yeah, you got to be able to. I find sometimes after role playing, I'm like, don't even talk to me, mate. Don't even fucking. I don't want to expend any fucking energy right now.
We do the same.
Don't even look at me.
When we're filming the Viva la Dirt League stuff, it's until now it's always been like a full day of thing from like 8 in the morning till 5 at night, and with a break for lunch, and that's it. The only break we get. And then we chop it into half-hour chunks, and then they get sent out to put the green screen stuff in it and things. But at the end of that day, it's just like even just towards the end of the episode, you can watch them. You can watch them week to week of half an hour chunks, and you can be like, and this is one after lunch. This is after lunch, with them all just being like after lunch coma, and then they start to get back into it again, and then this is 4 p.m. and this is the last two episodes of any season. It's like, okay, that was the last hour of gameplay. We're out of steam.
It's to be considerate to your other performers as well, not to get too method about it. Like, someone should be able to go have a scene with you where something is maybe confronting, or something is like fairly charged. A character might get angry at your character. They don't want to feel like they're getting angry at you. That would be a burden on them as a performer or as a role player. So knowing that they can see you step out of the character, that's a good thing for your fellow players as well.
Yeah, we keep talking about this latest season, but the finale had tears, recrimination. I was yelling at people. I was like my character was really offended by some of the angles that people were taking to try and convince me of something. But none of that was my issue with the performers. And afterwards, we started implementing, like, even if we're tired, we take half an hour as ourselves to check in at the end of a long day and be like, okay, was everything cool? Did we have to X card today? Even if we didn't, is everything cool? And so you know that actually that shouting and stuff was all in character, and it's all fine. It's
important. It's important. Something I have to do as a GM from time to time, to be like, just pause the scene and be like, this isn't bleeding over. Is everybody cool? Yeah. This is all in character. Cool. Let's keep going.
Right.
Leading on in a similar topic, Marie asks, recently one of my campaigns ended after 3 years. I was playing a character I have a lot of love for. It was so epic. Befriended the BBEG spy and betrayed at the height of their relationship. Blah, blah, blah. I've been struggling to say goodbye to this character. Any advice on letting her go? So after a campaign is done, what sort of acting tips, tricks, techniques do we have to say, like, how do you let a character go? How do you say goodbye to something?
The first thing I'd say is find a new story to tell with a new character, and try maybe not to think of it as letting it go, but finishing the story. In the same way that maybe you love a film or you love a book, putting the book to bed, or being like, well, that story is complete now. They have done what they needed to do or set out to do, or they finished their arc. Now that arc is over. Because I think there's potential where it's like, how do I get rid of this character, or how do I forget about this character, or how do I stop thinking about this character? The truth is, you shouldn't. I think you performed them, or you played as them for 3 years. That's a fantastic thing to do. That's a delightful thing to do, and you I hope had a lot of fun doing that. The answer to that is continue telling stories, tell a different story. And if you find that after maybe like a year or two, things keep cropping up about that character that you want to maybe
if you're still thinking about them,
again,
if you're still wondering about them in different circumstances, then you've got more stories to tell as that character.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like the Marie Kondo thing of like, you know, you don't want to just get rid of something. It's you should thank them for all the lessons they've taught you and you know, all the stories they've given. In terms of like tangible stuff, sometimes like when I finish a character, I like to get a bit of art made of them.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot.
Just to be like,
people finishing
like
a campaign, getting that art made of who they were at the end. Yeah,
exactly. Like, here's this character, I created them, their story's finished, and you know, they'll always be important to me. But that's done for now.
And on, you know, to extend what I was saying before about checking in, if you have a big campaign like that that finishes and wraps up, celebrate it. You know, gather with the people that you told the story with, and outside of that game, celebrate what it was. Give yourself closure, like a wrap party for a play or something.
Yeah. That's
commemorate it.
Yeah, great idea. Idlewild Thing asks, have you guys ever played Troika? The weirdness level of that game is high. I have
but I want to. It's very
1970s,
1980s kind of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy / Terry Pratchett. I'm super excited to try it. It's on my list. I saw that question come in and I was really excited. No, I haven't. It is on my list. I'm very excited to.
There's so many things on the list.
Season 11 of Rolltacast. You heard it here first. Troika.
The dragon is like this, like messed up, like geometric thing. So it doesn't. It's like diagonally constructed. It's really just like cool. It's very like it's in a very similar art style to like
look at this.
We Happy Few. Is the video game that came out recently that I think people would be familiar with. That's cool. It's great. No, I haven't. Yes, I want to. It's on the list.
If you're a Rolltacast patron as well, you can vote on the games that we play for our monthly live stream. So I'm just saying, if people want to see Troika,
plugging up Patreon while you're over at Patreon. While you're over on Patreon, check out Robert.
While you're there.
Last two questions coming from Concrete Forest. I understand you are all very creative. How would you describe a literal concrete forest? Use your best imagination.
No one's ever described me as creative, so.
That's true.
I think I would talk about how it sounds and the feel of underground or multi-story car park, the empty echoes, the damp coolness of the air that has nothing to react off. So it's almost like odorless and cold. And I think a concrete forest would be very dreamlike, and it would disappear like the pillars of Barad-dûr into darkness, and you would immediately be disoriented.
Yeah,
so I think it would be this echoey, empty, sensorially depriving place.
My first thought was like an actual forest that had been petrified in an instant by like the colliding of the material plane and the plane of Earth or something, and suddenly everything organic was now stone.
It's so interesting because I think I was thinking a similar thing of like, for me, the interesting thing is the mystery of that phrase itself, because it's like, is there something within the concrete? You know, is this a concrete facsimile of a forest? In which case, who created it? Is there something living under the concrete that can awaken one day? Or is this a whoever has made it, is this some sort of observation of what is real and natural but recreated in a sterile environment?
That's really creative, Ellen. You're really creative.
Thanks. Can you tell my second year acting teacher that? Thank you.
I'd probably go about it, describe. It depends on what the aim is. Like, is it to horrify? Is it to thrill? Is it to tantalize? My instant thought was graffiti. Is graffiti on these? Is this have kids reclaimed the forest by graffitiing the trees back into life, back into color? Or is there is the sun available? Does it reflect off like the wet of the concrete after it's rained? Or does the water pool? Or does it have nowhere to go? All of that good stuff. All right. Depends on the aim. Because you could just as easily have like a
kind of avatar themed, like a childy, cartoony kind of thing, and be like, and not have any of that horrific, like echoey kind of
liminal
stuff.
space kind of feel. Yeah.
Both
last question from Concrete Forest. I did see 2 come in, but I'm afraid we are well over time, so I'm only taking the one that came in on time. Concrete. Science versus magic, guns versus spells, radiation versus corruption. Opinions? Question mark. Which is a very loose definition of a question.
Got a lot of opinions there.
run me by them again. Science
versus magic.
Magic.
Guns versus spells. Or radiation versus corruption. Opinions? Question mark.
Look, hard sci-fi. I love hard sci-fi. So it's science for me. I don't mind fantasy. I love Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. But even Lord of the Rings is the magic is very kind of. It's not
very
mana
loose
and
it's
spells.
Like, where's the
Yeah.
It's a bit more kind of fundamental. So for me, it's science over magic. What was the next one?
Guns versus spells.
Guns versus spells.
Guns. Sorry.
Who are you apologizing to? Who are you apologizing
cool.
for? Radiation versus corruption.
Now, I think a big dose of purple corruption is actually going to be my outlier on that. I like the possibilities of corruption, how it can twist things into alternate forms. Yeah, those are my answers.
Ellen?
Well, as I fondle a skull that I wear around my neck, I think you can probably guess that I love corruption as a theme. In fact, like I've been writing a big sci-fi epic that will debut in theaters June 2024. It's called Starweaver. And the whole thing is against, science versus entropy. Like, entropy is, I think, a very good thing that is part of the natural way, and the idea of decay is something that I'm very interested in. So corruption, and me, Bluebeard's Bride is my favorite thing. I'm always metaphorical and narrative over literal and of the world. So it's always loosey goosey magic for me, baby. And why would you have guns when you can go pew pew with your hands?
Pew, pew.
Like, fuck, man.
Chris?
Give me magic. Give me magic over science.
What about magic
Give
guns?
me guns over spells.
Mm-hmm.
And give me corruption over radiation. Even though I'm really tempted to say radiation because I've been playing Fallout New Vegas. And I love Fallout New Vegas.
Yeah.
And the Fallout series is amazing, or at least 3 out of the games are.
Radiation's most fun when it
Argue
is
with
just
me
a kind
on
of
Twitter.
corruption, right?
Yeah, when
Yeah.
it just mutates.
When
and
radiation
corrupts.
is just a form of corruption, it's when it's most fun, right? When it's mutating things and
corruption is a very broad term, whereas radiation is a little more narrow. But in saying that, spells are way more broad, and I've picked guns. So I don't know what that says about me. However,
the question
have a BB gun.
magic guns, corruption, with radiation being for the Fallout series. I love you, Fallout.
The first question for me is impossible. Science versus magic. The story I just told was about me using my magic and physics. I'm like, that's using science with magic. There's no
Porque
versus.
las dos. The best
porque
stories
las dos.
have a bit of both. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, that is all the questions we have from the audience. Thank you very much for the audience for being here and checking in and being here to listen to us ramble on, even though if I was ignoring you for the first part of it. Thank you for those lovely questions. And thank you guys for being here as well. This has been an absolute delight to meet you and to chat with you. Let's end out with where can people find you, both on individual level and on a group level. Let's start with no particular order. I'm going to roll a d6 unless one of you wants to just jump in. Have it. That's Chris.
All right. I am at Bonding Chris, I think is my Twitter handle. Yes, it is. BONDINGCHRIS on Twitter. So come visit me on Twitter to hear my hot takes on TTRPGs and the state of the online media sphere, Twitter and Facebook and such, and just to hear some hot takes on film and theater. I'm a lot of fun. But yes, or maybe like vampire stuff. If Vampire the Masquerade or like some Powered by the Apocalypse games are the sort of thing that you're looking at exploring, if you're predominantly TTRPG, a D&D rather, I'm good to ask and follow up with. Yeah, or just, I don't know, listen to the podcast, Roll to Cast, ROLE, to cast.
Wonderful. Let's go odds and evens. That is odds. So Phil.
Yeah, I am Phil or Scruff. It's at SKKRUFF. So I stream every couple of weeks, roughly, on Twitch. So if you want to follow me, that's great. I just jump on and play some video games. I'm just playing some the System Shock remake at the moment. But you can also find me on Twitter as well. And I do a little bit of streaming with Cybernation Uncensored. So I'm playing Shadows of SRM with them in a couple days' time. That is Tuesday morning for me, Monday night for the rest of the world, if you don't live in the future like us in Australia. So yeah, that is a really, really grounded, dark fantasy, which is really, really cool. It's originally a French RPG. Not many people are familiar with it, but a very cool world. Come join us for that. And Ellen and I play on on Sirenscape, which is a really cool. They make a really cool program that lets you do sound effects on the fly, and they have a weekly stream that has been a little bit interrupted recently. But we have a very long-running Cyberpunk game on Thursday nights / Friday mornings for Australians over on Sirenscape, where we play Cyberpunk Red. And when we get back to it, we will be bringing our stories to hopefully a crescendo, I think, as we try to wrap up our many seasons of play. Yeah, so that's us. And as I can say, Roll to Cast, ROLE, we're on all of the podcatchers. Get us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, basically search for us. You will find us. We're also on YouTube as well.
Ellen, who are you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Sirenscape, like Phil said, but you can also find me playing Dragonlance with Rob every Wednesday. That's at gmworkshop.ca, which is awesome. I love that game so very, very, very much. Follow me on Twitter at LNKGraham1. I sometimes cry tweet, which is when I watch a piece of media, and I will take selfies every time I cry.
It's pretty funny.
It's pretty funny. We've got our record time of, I believe I started crying 2 minutes into Big Fish, the film. So let's see if I can beat that.
Speed run, crying.
Speed
Any
run.
percent.
Surely up, right? How soon can up get you crying?
Up will do it, but that's 8 minutes in.
Is
you
it
know,
8?
So...
Slow.
Yeah,
Up
it's
your
too
game.
slow. Get to the good shit. Yeah, you can also find me on Instagram at LEB96. You can see all the kind of different acting stuff I do there. I'm also a drag king, and you can follow him at FBoyGeorge69 on Instagram. You can see all the stuff
Nice.
he's going to be in. He's going to be in a AvCon show coming up next Friday. So I believe I'm going to be doing a Bilbo Baggins routine and a Geralt of Rivia routine. So that should be
Nice.
very, very fun. I'm looking for a small inflatable pool. No spoilers. No spoilers.
For Bilbo,
and as
obviously.
everyone says, follow Roll to Cast on all of the socials. It's ROLE, of course. And head to our Discord where we chat not just about our seasons, but TTRPGs. What have you been watching? Show us your pets. We've got a really cool little thriving community. So join us over in Discord.
And who wants to give Sean his shout out? Where can you find Sean?
Sean means John on Twitter. That's all he gets. No, I don't know if he talks about his Instagram is private. I know, so people don't get
is
access
it?
to that. Yeah,
Never mind.
Yeah, it's
I
sneaky.
was going to reveal it.
But I know Sean would just love people to check out the podcast, have a listen to it, pick a season. They're not sequential. Like you don't have to listen to one then the other. Pick a season that you enjoy the idea of. And so whether that's science fiction, whether that is dark and gritty fantasy with season 6 The Witcher, whether that is Spielberg kind of kids adventure with season 5 with Ellen's Kids on Bikes, pick one, have a listen, try a different TTRPG and have fun. I think that's his social medias. That's what I've got here in front of me on this piece of paper.
And you can also hear Sean, because Sean is a wrestling commentator for some Adelaide wrestling rings. So yeah, you can kind of follow his exploits. I'm fairly sure he tweets about them when there's big events coming up on his Twitter. So yeah.
Also, Sean is on Dreaded GM. Is that right?
Yes, every Thursday for Horror on the Orient Express.
Yes. So you got like 5 days to get ready before you see more Sean on the screen.
Pretty exciting stuff. If you are here from the Roll2Cast community and you don't know who I am, I'm Robert Hartley GM. You can see it above you on the screen if you have visuals. Otherwise, it's ROBERT HARTLEYGM, and it's that handle on all of the platforms: Twitter, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitch. Where else am I? I've got a podcast. I've got a Patreon. I technically have an OnlyFans, but there's no content on there. I have what else do I have? There's something else, I'm sure. Robert Hartley GM. There's a Discord community.
I was going to say, what's your bank number?
It's my bank number. It's Robert Hartley GM. It took me a lot of paperwork to get it, but they eventually agreed. So thank you very much for joining us. And the pin is ROB. So it's just RHGM.
Amazing.
Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a true delight. I'm sure I could talk to you for hours more. I hope to meet you guys in person sometime, maybe when I'm in Adelaide or you're in Auckland, or we're collectively at some sort of nerd convention.
We would love
I will be at PAX Australia this year. I'm also at Gen Con in 2 weeks' time, so lots of conventioning.
Ooh,
Yeah.
Lots of conventioning this year. So thank you for joining us. Before we leave out, what do we? I think I see Atlantis in the periscope.
Oh gosh!
What
Who
do we
started
do?
the submarine? I
What
thought
do
we
we
were
do?
taking a rest.
No, I started it again. The submarine was on autopilot as we were resting, so I think that's Atlantis in the distance. Let's head off back over to the ending soon screen, and I'll find somebody to give a raid to.
Is that Harold Holt?
Harold! How are you?
Mermaid now. We missed you,
He
buddy.
was in Atlantis.
We didn't actually miss him.
Hey, you've reached the end. This is the part where I've got to say something funny and or witty, and so like it and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.